My in-laws were drunk. Despite the whispers from people around us, my in-laws didn't seem to care as they kept yelling at me. Well, I guess it's too late since you're already married, but if you want to be part of this family, you need to show us you have enough money, they said. Yes, your dad is right, so make sure to give us $1,000 a month as a new bonus, they added. I was stunned by their words. I couldn't believe they would say such things at a wedding reception. I just stared at them, my face going pale. My dad took the microphone from them. Enough is enough. Don't you realize you're making fools of yourselves? He said. My name is Linda. I'm a 30-year-old office worker. I'm currently dating Larry, who is 32, 2 years older than me. I met him through a friend who was worried about me being single, so she introduced me to Larry. After dating for a year, Larry proposed, and now we are soon to be married. I lost my mother when I was very young, and my father raised me by himself. He worked very hard to take care of all my needs. I didn't have many worries growing up, but losing my mom, who I loved so much, deeply hurt me. Because I lost someone I cared about so much, I was cautious with my emotions. That's why I hadn't really dated anyone since my school days. I'd even thought it would be okay if I stayed single forever. Then I met Larry. At first, I didn't feel any romantic feelings for him, even though he asked me out many times. Larry really cared about me and was always a gentleman. Slowly, I began to open my heart to him, and we started dating. He kept caring for me, and I felt very happy. He became very special to me, and I started thinking I wanted to be with him forever. Then he proposed, and we decided to get married. Larry understood everything about me and was always kind to me no matter what. Don't worry, if you're ever feeling unsure about something, I'll be here for you until you feel better. I love you, Linda. You can count on me, he would say. His words moved me. He promised to make me happy for the rest of my life. Just being with him warmed my heart. If he cared that much for me, I thought I should do the same for him. When I told my father that we decided to get married, he was so happy that he cried. Wow, Linda, you're finally getting married. I'm so happy for you, he said. Oh, Dad, you're being dramatic, I joked. Wow, I hadn't heard anything like that from you until now. I was always worried that you might never get married, he replied. Oh, really? I had no idea you were worried about that, I said. Well, every father worries about his daughter, you know. Anyway, congratulations, he said. Thanks, Dad, I replied. I was so happy to be congratulated by my dad, who had raised me by himself. I thought I would probably cry at the wedding, and my dad would probably cry even more since he was already crying now. With that, Larry and I started preparing for our wedding. We were both busy with our jobs, so our days were very hectic. We worked during the weekdays and made wedding preparations over the weekends. There was no time to rest. Our calendars were always full. On the rare day off, we were supposed to visit Larry's parents' house. It was my first time meeting them. Larry had met my father right after he proposed to me. Originally, I planned to visit Larry's parents soon after, but they were busy and our schedules never lined up. Finally, we managed to arrange a visit. As we arrived, I suddenly felt nervous. Don't worry, my parents are very kind, Larry reassured me. His words made me feel a bit better, and I rang the doorbell. It was his mother who opened the door. Mom, I'm home, Larry said. Welcome home, Larry. It's so good of you to come, his mother replied warmly. As she talked with her son, I greeted her politely. Nice to meet you. My name is Linda, and I'm Larry's fiancée. I see, so you're Linda, she said, her tone shifting. She looked me up and down, her smile fading. Then she led us to the living room, where her cold attitude remained. Linda, I'm curious about what you bring to the table. Larry is our treasure and our only child. If you're going to marry him, you need to be a suitable wife. Are you worthy of him? She asked, sounding more like an interrogation. I was taken aback by her question. I hadn't expected such a cold attitude from my future mother-in-law and was at a loss for words. You're going to join our family, you know. Are you ready for that? She continued. True, marrying Larry meant joining his family, but it's not like Larry's family were the Kennedys or some well-known high society family. It's not like I was marrying into a royal family. Why was I being asked to make such a commitment? Besides, I wasn't even going to live with them. I don't like being pressured with questions like these. As I was thinking about how to respond, his mother seemed impatient with my slow reply and scolded me harshly. When I ask you a question, answer me right away. You're so rude, she snapped. I'm asking if you're ready for this, she continued, raising her voice. Despite feeling overwhelmed, I managed to say, I hope that Larry and I will support each other in our marriage." When I said that, his mother was not convinced. What a naive thing to say. You aren't just going to support each other. You were supposed to support Larry. It's your job as a wife to support your husband. You don't even understand the basics, she criticized. Then Larry's father, who was sitting next to her, intervened. "Honey, calm down. Sorry about that, Linda. You must have been startled by my wife's words," he said, trying to ease the tension. "It's all right," I replied, trying to remain calm. His mother is very protective of her only son. Maybe she was just nervous and spoke without thinking. Just then, Larry's brother walked in. He spoke in a quiet, calm, and gentle tone. He seemed like a kind man, which gave me a moment of relief. But that relief was short-lived. With a smile on his face, he said the most unexpected thing. "What my wife says is actually justified. What concerns me the most is that you come from a single-parent family." "What do you mean by that?" I asked, confused. "Well, being raised by just one parent doesn't have a good public image. We can't be too happy to have such a person become the wife of our only son, can we?" he explained. "Hold on a minute," I said, unable to let this comment slide. "What is wrong with being raised by a single parent? My father worked very hard to raise me by himself. I am very thankful for my upbringing, and I am proud of my father. Being raised by a single parent doesn't make me any less valuable." But they still argued. Since you were missing one parent, you couldn't have learned how to be a good wife, do housework, and such. I responded, "I did a lot of housework to help my father. I can also cook pretty well, so please don't say that." Despite my response, Larry's words ignored what I said, and he finally stated, "I will allow you to marry Larry, but in exchange, you must promise to devote everything to us because we are Larry's parents. Can you promise me that?" "What?" I was shocked. "Wow, since you came here to ask for our permission to marry our son, you do know what your duties are, don't you?" Before I could say more, he continued the conversation. I found that my in-laws had completely taken over the conversation, giving me little chance to respond. That night, as I thought more about the marriage, I decided to share my feelings with Larry. "Say, Larry, do your parents always talk to people like that?" "What about it?" Larry seemed unfazed. I was surprised that Larry didn't see anything wrong with what his parents had said to me. "Well, I mean the way your parents spoke to me and what they said." "Oh, really?" "Well, they were just talking about whether you were ready for this marriage. I get that your parents are worried about their son's marriage, but I feel like what they were saying was a bit too much," I said. "Really? Why is that? My parents didn't say anything wrong. Besides, they've given us permission to get married, so don't worry about it," Larry replied. "That's true, but I felt uneasy," I said. Larry seemed to side with his parents more than with me, and that was very troubling. I guess he realized I was feeling unsure because he gave me a hug. "Linda, you don't have to worry so much. My parents are just a bit upset because their only son is getting married," he said. He spoke as if he didn't fully support me. "It's all going to be fine. Don't overthink it. I'm sure they just want what's best for us. They want us to be as good of a couple as they are. That's why they were a bit harsh." "Oh, really?" I replied. Like he said, maybe his parents have high expectations for us. But even if that's the case, I don't think it's right for them to belittle me because I was raised by my father. I don't think people who say such things make a good couple. We are the ones getting married, and we should be the focus, not their approval or disapproval. With that perspective, although I was still a bit upset, I decided not to dwell too much on his parents' opinions. Then the day of the wedding arrived. We had many guests, including our relatives, friends, colleagues, and bosses. I walked down the aisle with my father, who had raised me all my life. Larry and I exchanged our vows and rings. We were met with applause, and for the first time, I truly realized that I was getting married to Larry. I felt the happiness I had never felt before. As we walked into the reception hall, we made our way through the crowd, greeted by videos of us as part of the entertainment. It was a joyful time. I chatted with friends I hadn't seen in a while, and many people congratulated us. Despite my earlier worries about his parents, I was glad I had decided to marry Larry. I was glad we decided to have a memorable day. After the ceremony, we planned to officially register our marriage, and Larry and I would become husband and wife. I cherished every moment and felt so happy. Time flew by, and soon it was time for the final part of the event. The bride and groom and both sets of parents lined up to greet the guests, but I started to feel uneasy because of Larry's parents. We were all supposed to be standing in line, but his parents were wobbly on their feet. If you looked closely, you could see that their faces were bright red. They had drunk too much. Some relatives asked if they were okay. My in-laws were clearly drunk, but we had to wrap up the ceremony and get it over with. The moderator handed the microphone to me and Larry. Suddenly, Larry's mother snatched my hand away from him and yelled at me like a professional wrestler in the middle of a challenge. "Listen to me, Linda. After this wedding, you are going to devote yourself to us completely. Prepare yourself because we are going to test you really hard," she said. The guests started whispering to each other, and some even thought it was a joke and laughed. Then Larry's father grabbed the microphone. "Linda, don't you feel embarrassed to wear a dress like that? It doesn't suit you at all, dear. You should tell her the truth," his mother chimed in. As expected, the whispers among the guests changed in tone. I looked at Larry, hoping he would stop his father's rude comments, but Larry said he couldn't do that and that his parents weren't doing anything wrong. It became clear he would never protect me from his parents in the future. That was the moment I realized it. I was certain of it, even as the hall buzzed around us. My in-laws were drunk and continued to insult me. "Well, you're already married, but if you're going to be part of this family, you need to prove that you have enough money," they said. "Yes, that's right," they continued. "After you register your marriage at the city hall, you should give us a few thousand a month and your entire bonus." I was shocked by their words. I never thought they would say such things at our wedding reception. I just stared at them, feeling my face go pale. My father took the microphone from them. "Enough of this. Don't you realize you're making fools of yourselves?" he said. Though still showing some respect, his parents glared at my father. "Why are you interrupting us while we're talking?" I knew this woman's father was no good. "Single parents are never any good," they said. Why did they talk like this? How dare they insult my father, I thought. My father, keeping his cool, replied, "You people are even worse than I imagined. You even refuse to meet me because I am a single father. I never thought that someone like you would work for President Scott. President Scott is such a respectable person. I assumed his employees would be decent as well," my father continued. At that, my father-in-law's face turned very serious. How do you know President Scott?" "He's a business partner of my company and, more importantly, an old friend of mine," my father explained. "And speaking of single parents, President Scott was raised by his mother alone. So you just insulted the president of the company you work for." Seeing my in-laws' faces fall at my father's words, I realized they finally understood the mess they had gotten themselves into. "I apologize, sir. Please don't tell the president about this," my in-law pleaded, suddenly falling to his knees. Just moments before, he had acted like he was in charge, but now he looked defeated. I could hear laughter from the guests. Some even pulled out their cell phones to record the scene. "No matter how much you apologize, you can't take back your words," my dad said. He walked over to me and asked if I wanted to go home with him. I said yes and took the microphone from Larry's hand. "Thank you for the great entertainment, but there will be no marriage," I announced to Larry, his parents, and everyone who attended. "I will make sure to return the money you gave us for this occasion." Then I left the reception hall with my dad. I caught a glimpse of Larry and his parents looking dismayed, and soon after, his relatives rushed over with worried expressions on their faces. The place must have been in complete chaos. As I returned their money, I apologized to the guests. They all expressed sympathy for me and praised me and my dad for our actions, saying it was good that we weren't taken advantage of by such terrible people. Later, Larry's co-workers who had attended the reception must have spread the word about what happened at his company. Larry became known for having such unreasonable parents and was criticized for having a weak character. His embarrassment was so great that he resigned voluntarily. Of course, the president of my father-in-law's company found out about the incident. Larry's father was demoted and sent to an insignificant division of the company, transferred to a remote office in the countryside. I heard that Larry's family has been ostracized by all his relatives because of what happened at the wedding. While it's unfortunate, it really was their own doing, and sometimes things like that just can't be avoided. In the meantime, I've been using this opportunity to strengthen my relationship with my dad. We've been spending more quality time together, and it's helped me appreciate all he's done for me even more. One day, he sat me down for a serious talk. "Linda, are you interested in running the business?" he asked, looking at me with a mixture of hope and seriousness. "Do you mean?" I started, a bit unsure where he was heading with this. "Why don't you work towards becoming the president of my company?" he suggested. It was a big step, and he seemed to believe I was ready to take it on. I'll do my best, I promised him, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. I decided then to focus on stepping up my game at work rather than getting entangled in romantic relationships for now. I wanted to prove to myself and to my dad that I could excel and perhaps one day be a great leader like him. Currently, I am deeply involved in learning everything I can at my dad's company. The work is challenging but fulfilling, and I'm determined to make the most of this opportunity. Reflecting on the wedding fiasco, it's clear that Larry's in-laws were quite unreasonable, turning what should have been a beautiful event into a spectacle. Thankfully, since the marriage wasn't officially registered, Linda, myself in this scenario, was spared from a legally binding mistake. Now, free from any marital ties and with no looming in-law issues, I can focus solely on my career aspirations. It's a relief to know that out of a chaotic situation came a clear path forward for me. I look forward to what the future holds and am excited about the potential of leading the company. I wish myself all the best and hope that anyone watching this story can take something valuable from it. Thank you for staying till the end. Please consider subscribing if you enjoyed this story, and I hope to see you in the next video.
Life's funny, isn't it? One minute you're on top of the world, the next, it's crumbling beneath your feet. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. This story begins in the warm glow of happiness. My name's Emily, and not too long ago, my biggest problem was deciding what to cook for dinner or what movie to watch on a lazy Sunday afternoon. James and I met in what you might call the old-fashioned way, at a mutual friend's barbecue. He was the guy flipping burgers and telling stories, making everyone laugh. I remember thinking, who is this guy? With his easy smile and a way of looking at me like I was the only one there. It didn't take long for us to become an us. Emily, you have to try my special burger, he'd said, handing me a plate with a confidence that made me smile. It's got a secret sauce that'll change your life. I laughed, rolling my eyes. Change my life, huh? That's a pretty big claim for a burger. But I'll admit, it was a darn good burger. Maybe not life-changing, but it definitely made that day memorable. Not long after, James met Grandma. She was everything to me, the one who raised me when my own parents couldn't. The way he talked to her, with respect and a bit of playful banter, it won her over in a heartbeat. I like him, she whispered to me as he went to grab us some lemonade. He's genuine, and he's got kind eyes. You hold on to this one, Emily. And hold on, I did. We got married in a small ceremony, just family and close friends. The house I moved into was full of memories. The walls echoed with laughter from a time when my parents were still alive. James and I started filling it with new memories of our own, and it felt like life was just right. I got pregnant about a year into the marriage. When I told James, the look on his face was something I thought I'd remember forever with warmth in my heart. His joy seemed to match mine, filling up the room until it was almost bursting. We're going to have a baby, Em, he said, lifting me up and spinning me around. A little one of our own, can you believe it? I can, I whispered back, because it's happening with you. They say bad news never has good timing. The day I lost Grandma was a cold slap of reality, a reminder that life doesn't play fair. Grandma was more than family. She was my confidant, my cheerleader, my safe place. Losing her felt like being adrift at sea without a compass. I remember sitting on the sofa, a cup of tea growing cold in my hands, numb. James came to me, his face a mask of concern. Em, talk to me, he urged, his voice gentle. What's there to talk about? I muttered, staring at the tea, watching as it lost its steam, its warmth, its life, kind of like how I felt inside. We'll get through this together. You're not alone, he said, wrapping an arm around my shoulder. But his words, meant to comfort, felt distant, like a radio playing softly in the background, familiar yet easy to tune out. Then, as if I hadn't already been robbed of enough, our baby slipped away before I ever got to hold them, to tell them how much I loved them, to promise them the world. The miscarriage was like a physical blow, one that knocked the wind out of me and left me gasping for air, for answers, for comfort that wouldn't come. James was there, yes, always there, but somehow not really. Emily, we can try for another baby when you're ready, he said one night as we lay in the darkness. his voice void of the pain I felt. I turned to him, a part of me desperate to find the husband who had once spun me around in joy. "I don't want another baby, James. I wanted this one. Our baby." The words were a whisper, but they might as well have been screams for how they echoed in the silence. "We'll make it through this," he said. But his assurance sounded hollow, like a promise made out of obligation rather than desire. I sought refuge in solitude, in the quiet of the house filled with too many ghosts of what could have been. Days melded into nights, and I lost track of time. I lost track of myself. James tried, in his way. "Let's go out, see people. It might help," he suggested one day, his hand resting lightly on the back of the chair I was slumped in. I shook my head, my eyes fixed on a crack in the wall, a blemish I hadn't noticed before. "I can't face the world, James. Not yet. The world is where the pain is." "Emily, staying cooped up in here won't change what happened," he pressed, but I barely heard him. How could I tell him that the world outside these walls reminded me of everything I had lost? That every street corner, every shop window, every smiling face was a reminder of a happiness that felt like it had been stolen from me? The funeral was a blur. People came, they said things, they left. I nodded, I shook hands, I accepted condolences. But nothing got through. I was in a bubble, watching life happen around me, a life I no longer felt a part of. James was there, of course, but his presence felt more like a shadow than a source of warmth. "You're so strong, Emily," he told me after the service, his hand finding mine. I wanted to pull away, to scream that I wasn't strong, that I was broken. Instead, I just nodded. What was the point in correcting him? The truth seemed too heavy to share, even with him. As days turned into weeks, I felt James pulling away. Maybe he was tired of dealing with someone who seemed to have given up on life. Maybe he just didn't know how to help me. Maybe he needed an escape from the suffocating sadness that had enveloped our home. "I'm here for you, Em, but you need to start being here too," he said one evening, his patience wearing thin. "Here?" I echoed, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't even know where here is anymore, James." He sighed, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "I mean, you need to start living again, for your sake and mine." I looked up at him then, really looked at him, and saw the strain in his eyes. I knew he was struggling too, in his own way, but the gulf between us had grown too wide, too deep to cross with mere words. That's when the creeping thought began to take root. Maybe I was alone in this after all. James was there, but not really. Not in the way I needed him to be. As the days rolled into weeks and then months, the chasm between James and me grew wider. The man who had once seemed like my anchor was becoming more and more like a stranger, coming home late and sometimes not at all. It gnawed at me, this feeling of him slipping away. I remember one evening, the clock ticking past midnight and the other side of the bed still cold and untouched. When he finally came through the door, I couldn't hold back anymore. "Where have you been, James? Do you know what time it is?" My voice was shaky but firm. He looked tired, his eyes avoiding mine. "Work's been a nightmare. You know how it is." His voice was flat, dismissive almost. "No, I don't know," I snapped back, "because you never talk to me about it anymore. You never talk to me about anything." He let out a long sigh and began to take off his jacket. "Em, we've been through this. Work is work. It's stressful, and I don't want to burden you with it." "But I want to share that burden, James. I thought that's what we did," I said, the last of my words trailing off into a whisper. He paused and finally sat down on the edge of the bed, looking at me. "I know, and I appreciate it, but you have enough on your plate." "Enough on my plate?" I repeated, incredulous. "You mean dealing with the loss and trying to piece myself back together? Do you think ignoring me helps with that?" "That's not what I'm doing," he protested. But even as he said it, it sounded like he didn't believe it himself. "I offered you a divorce, James," I reminded him, my voice breaking a little. "I told you that you didn't have to stay with me out of pity or obligation." He looked up sharply at that. "Is that what you think this is? Pity? Obligation?" There was a hint of the old fire in his voice, a glimmer of the man I knew. Yes, that's what it feels like, I admitted. You're here, but you're not with me, not really, and it hurts. He ran his hands through his hair, a sure sign he was stressed. I'm trying. I really am, but I can't just switch off from work. It's been really tough. But it's more than work, isn't it? You're away even when you're here. You've got your phone on you all the time, always texting, always distracted. He didn't say anything to that, just stared at the floor. Is there someone else? The question hung in the air, heavy and frightening. Don't be ridiculous, he said quickly, but his eyes told a different story. I felt a coldness spread through me. This was not the man I married, the one who would look me in the eyes and tell me the truth, no matter how hard. I need you to be honest with me, James. Please, I implored, my hands clasping and unclasping in my lap. He was silent for a long moment, and then, there's no one else. It's just work. You've got to believe me. I wanted to. Oh, how I wanted to believe him. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and once that happens, things can never go back to how they were. In the weeks that followed, I watched James like a detective. I noticed how his phone was always face down, how he'd step out of the room to take calls. The signs were there, and I couldn't ignore them anymore. It was a Wednesday when my world finally started to crumble. I answered a call from a number I didn't recognize. Hello? Is this Emily Stanton? The voice was male, gruff, and not one I knew. Yes, who's this? The man paused and then, we need to talk about your husband. My heart sank. What about him? I think you'd better sit down, Mrs. Stanton. The cafe was one of those nondescript places, sandwiched between a laundromat and a closed-down bookstore. It seemed like a fitting backdrop for what was to come. I sat there, stirring my coffee, each second stretching out like an eternity until the man showed up. He was a large man, with a look that didn't invite many questions. He sat across from me, his hands clasped together, a folder sitting like a barrier between us. Mrs. Stanton, I'm sorry for the mystery, but I thought it was best we talk in person, he started, his voice serious. Who are you? I asked, my voice steady despite the storm inside. He nodded as if he expected the question. My name's Mike Sanders, and I believe we have a common problem. Your husband, James. I swallowed hard. What about him? Mike opened the folder and slid a photo across the table. It was James with a woman I'd never seen before. They were laughing, close, too close. That's my wife, Mike said, tapping the picture. I felt a strange detachment looking at it. What do they have to do with each other? They work together, and they're having an affair, he said bluntly. I looked up, meeting his gaze. That's impossible. James would never... He reached back into the folder and took out a handful of printed messages, placing them in front of me. These are just from the past week. I read them, each word a tiny dagger. There were plans to meet up, pet names, and talk of the future. A future without me, without us. Why are you showing me this? I asked, my voice a ghost of itself. Because I thought you should know, and because I want to end it. I thought maybe you would want that too. I stared at the evidence, my mind racing, but my heart already knew the truth. He told me he loved me. He promised he'd never leave. People lie, Mrs. Stanton, and they're good at it, Mike said, his voice bitter. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. He was all I had. Mike leaned forward. You got a choice here. You can pretend this never happened, go on with your life. Or you can confront him, make him face what he's done. And what about you? I asked. He sighed, a heavy, weary sound. I'm going to divorce her. She can have him if she wants. I just want out. My hands were shaking as I gathered the papers, folding them with care I didn't feel. What are you going to do? Mike asked. The answer surprised even me. I'm going to fight back. Mike nodded. Good. If you need anything, evidence, support, you let me know. Thank you, I said. But as I stood up, I felt anything but thankful. My life as I knew it was over, and it was time for me to figure out what came next. That day, the sun hung low, a glaring eye that seemed to watch over the unfolding scene with indifference. I was waiting on the porch when James's car pulled up. His step was light, too light for a man coming home to a crumbling marriage. He caught the look on my face as he approached. "What's with the gloom?" he asked casually, as if my scowl was just another part of an ordinary day. I held up one of the photos silently. His eyes flicked to it, and his smile faltered, but only for a second. "Oh, that," he chuckled. "I see you've met my other woman." I felt a hollow laugh bubble up from my throat. "Is that all you can say?" "Oh, that?" He folded his arms and leaned against the porch railing. "What do you want me to say? That I'm sorry? That it was a mistake? Because it wasn't. I'm not sorry, and it was no mistake." "Why, James?" I demanded, my hands clenching the photo so tightly the edges crumpled. He laughed, a cold, heartless sound. "You were convenient, you know? A nice house, a decent bit of savings, and when your grandmother passed, well, that was just icing on the cake." I recoiled as if he'd struck me. "You think my grandmother's death was a financial gain?" "Why else would I stick around?" He shrugged. "Especially after, you know." He paused, eyeing me with a cruelty I hadn't seen before. "After the kid." I shook my head in disbelief. "And you hoped what? That I'd off myself in grief?" "Would have made things simpler," he quipped. His words were like acid, burning through the last vestiges of the life I thought I knew. "You're vile," I hissed. "You always were too sensitive, too stupid to see what was right in front of you." He continued mercilessly. "You thought I would end my life?" I asked, the reality of his betrayal sinking in, a cold weight in my stomach. "It would have been a win-win. You'd escape your pathetic little life, and I'd be free with a nice little nest egg." His grin was the ugliest thing I'd ever seen. I couldn't hold back the tears, but I was damned if I'd let him see them fall. "And now? What's your grand plan now?" "Now?" He laughed again, stepping closer. "Now, I guess I'll have to settle for a divorce. You'll probably screw me over on that, won't you? Drag it out. Make me suffer." "You don't deserve quick and easy," I managed to say, my voice surprisingly even. His expression soured. "You're an ugly, stupid woman, you know that? I don't know what I was thinking, marrying you." I looked at him then, really looked at him, and I felt something shift inside me. The man I had loved was a ghost, a fiction. In his place stood a stranger with a heart full of venom. "Get off my porch, James," I said quietly. He smirked, taking a step back. "Gladly. This place was never really my style anyway." The courthouse was a place where I thought I'd celebrate our milestones. Instead, I walked up its steps to dissolve the very foundation of my marriage. Mike was right beside me, his presence a silent support. I had the papers in my hand, feeling the weight of every word that testified against James. Mike carried his own set of damning evidence, a mirror to my betrayal. Our steps echoed in the empty hallway, a march towards a verdict we both needed. Inside the courtroom, the air was stale, heavy with the burden of judgments past. James and his mistress, Mike's wife, were already there, a tableau of guilt. "Mrs. Stanton?" the clerk called out. I stepped forward, handing over the sheaf of papers that detailed every misstep of my husband's affair. The judge surveyed the room, his gaze lingering on me, then on Mike. "You have evidence to present?" I nodded, my throat tight. "Yes, Your Honor." The evidence was laid bare for the court to see. Photographs that spoke 1,000 words of betrayal, texts and call logs that wove a narrative of deceit. I didn't look at James. I didn't need to see his face to remember his lies. "And how do you plead?" the judge asked, turning to James and his co-defendant. Their answers were a soft murmur of legalese. "No contest." The judge took his time, reviewing the evidence, his expression unreadable. Then, finally, he spoke, his voice the gavel that shattered the last tie between James and me. "In light of the uncontested evidence, I am granting the petition for divorce. The division of assets will proceed as outlined, and given the circumstances, Mr. Stanton, you will also pay restitution." James stood, his face ashen, but I felt nothing. No victory, no joy, just the hollow end of a chapter. Mike met my gaze, a silent question in his eyes. Had it been worth it? I could only nod. It wasn't about winning or losing anymore. It was about setting the record straight, about reclaiming my dignity from the ruins James had left behind. The courtroom's heavy door swung closed behind me with a sound that felt final. Mike and I found a quiet corner in the bustling hallway outside. "So, it's done," Mike said, his voice a mix of relief and something else, maybe sadness. I nodded, the reality of the situation settling in. "It's done. They didn't even put up a fight, did they?" "No," he sighed, looking down at the floor. "They knew there was no point." I thought about James, about the love I thought we shared, and how it had all been a lie. "Do you think they're sorry for what they did, or just sorry they got caught?" Mike's gaze met mine, steady and sure. "Does it matter? They're out of our lives now. That's what counts." I let out a long breath, one I'd been holding since the day I got that call. "I guess you're right. I didn't want it to end this way." "Nobody ever does," he said. "But you stood up for yourself. That counts for a lot." The weight of the papers in my bag seemed lighter now. Justice, or something like it, had been served. It didn't undo the past, but it cleared the path for the future. "I just want to move on," I admitted. "And you will," Mike assured me. "This is a fresh start for both of us." I managed a small smile. "A fresh start," I echoed. We walked to the exit, the light from the doors growing brighter as we approached. Outside, the sun was shining, and the world moved on, indifferent to the small dramas unfolding in its midst. "Emily," Mike said as we stepped into the daylight, "what will you do first?" I thought for a moment. "I'm going to go home, take a long bath, and then I'm going to start planning my future, one step at a time." "That sounds perfect," he said. "And if you ever need a friend, you know where to find me." I looked at him, grateful for his unexpected friendship. "Thank you, Mike, for everything." The days following the divorce were quiet. One afternoon, as I was sorting through some of Grandma's old things, the doorbell rang. I hesitated for a moment, half expecting the past to be on my doorstep, but it was just Sarah, my neighbor. "Hey, Emily," she greeted me with a warm, if somewhat pitying smile. "I heard about everything. I'm so sorry. I brought you some casserole. I figured you might not feel like cooking." I managed a small laugh. "You figured right. Thanks, Sarah." We settled in the kitchen, the casserole warming in the oven, filling the room with a homely scent. "So, what will you do now?" Sarah asked, sipping on the tea I'd made for us. "I'm not sure," I admitted, "but I'm thinking of selling the house. There are too many memories here. I need a fresh start." "That sounds like a good idea," she said. "A new place, new memories." "Yeah," I mused, gazing out of the kitchen window. "I want to travel too, see the places Grandma and I always talked about." "That's wonderful, Emily. It's what you deserve," Sarah encouraged. I smiled, feeling a flicker of excitement at the thought. "It is, isn't it? I spent so long living for someone else, trying to be what James wanted. It's time I lived for myself." Sarah reached across the table, giving my hand a reassuring squeeze. "You've got this. And who knows, maybe along the way, you'll find someone who loves you for you." "I hope so. But for now, I'm okay with being by myself," I said, feeling a strength within me that I hadn't felt in years. "You're stronger than you know, Emily. And this fresh start is just the beginning for you," Sarah said with a knowing nod. The timer on the oven dinged then, breaking our conversation. As I stood to get the casserole out, I felt a sense of closure. The chapter with James was over, but my story was far from finished. As I drifted off to sleep, I thought of Grandma, of her strength and her love. She had wanted me to be happy, to be cared for. In the end, I realized the person who needed to care for me the most was myself. And with that realization, I knew that no matter where I went or what I did, I would be okay. My name is Emma. I'm 30 years old, and I work as a financial advisor. That's where I met David, my now ex-husband. I remember that day like it was yesterday. He walked into my office with a stack of papers and a troubled look on his face. "Emma, right?" he said, offering a handshake. "I'm David Caldwell. I heard you're the best in sorting out financial messes." "That's what they say," I replied, smiling. "Let's see what we can do about yours." David was tall, with short brown hair and eyes that seemed to smile even when he didn't. As I sifted through his documents, we started talking. It wasn't just about numbers and taxes. We talked about our favorite movies, music, and even debated over the best pizza in town. He had this easy way about him that made hours feel like minutes. "You know, I never thought sorting my finances would be this enjoyable," David admitted as we wrapped up. "Guess I have a magic touch," I joked. David laughed. "Would you like to grab a coffee sometime?" My treat, for making this not as painful as I expected. That coffee turned into dinner, and dinners turned into weekend getaways. We were inseparable. After 6 months, David proposed, and without a moment's hesitation, I said yes. It was a whirlwind romance, but it felt right. Our wedding was simple yet beautiful. Standing there, exchanging vows, I thought I had found my forever. David's mom, Barbara, was there too. She was a stern-looking woman, but seemed happy for us. "You better give me grandkids soon," she whispered to me with a half-smile. Life as a married couple was blissful at first. David worked in real estate, and I continued at my firm. We shared dinners, movie nights, and long walks. We were a team, or so I thought. However, things began to change when the topic of children came up more frequently. It started with occasional remarks from Barbara, but soon became her constant demand. She would call and ask if I was pregnant yet, and during visits she'd say, "A grandchild would make this family complete." David always laughed it off. "Mom, give us some time," he'd say, but the pressure was building. At first, I tried to be understanding. After all, she was just an excited grandmother-to-be. But her persistence started to weigh on me. It was like our marriage wasn't enough without a child. "David, your mom needs to back off a bit," I said to him one evening. "I feel like she's more in our marriage than we are." David looked uncomfortable. "She's just excited, Emma. Let's not make a big deal out of it." As time went on, Barbara's influence in our life became more and more evident. It wasn't just about her constant nagging for grandchildren. She had opinions about everything, from how we should manage our finances to what we should eat. One Saturday morning, David and I were enjoying breakfast when his phone rang. It was Barbara. David put it on speaker, as he usually did. "David, dear, are you both eating healthy? Remember, a healthy diet is important for conceiving," she said in her usual authoritative tone. David chuckled. "Yes, Mom, we're eating healthy. Don't worry." I forced a smile, but inside I was screaming. It felt like she was monitoring our every move. Things got more intense when Barbara started visiting us more frequently. One evening, she came over unannounced, carrying a stack of parenting books. "Emma, you should start reading these. It's never too early to prepare," she said, dumping the books on the coffee table. I glanced at David, hoping he would say something, but he just shrugged. "Thanks, Barbara. We'll look into them," I said, trying to sound grateful. Her visits became a regular occurrence. It was like she was keeping tabs on us, making sure we were doing everything right to have a child. And every time she brought up the topic, David would just nod and agree with her. One night, after another of Barbara's visits, I couldn't hold it in anymore. "David, we need to talk," I said, frustration evident in my voice. "What's up?" he asked, not looking up from the TV. "It's your mom. She's suffocating us with this baby talk. We barely have time to be a couple without her interference," I said. David finally looked at me. "She's just excited, Emma. She means well." "Excited or obsessed?" I countered. "It feels like she's the third person in our marriage." David sighed. "She's my mom. What do you want me to do? Tell her to stop caring?" "It's not about caring, David. It's about respecting our space, our decisions. Can't you see that?" David didn't respond. He just turned back to the TV, and that was the end of our conversation. But it wasn't the end of the issue. If anything, it only got worse. Barbara's visits became more frequent and her comments more intrusive. "You two should go on a vacation. Just relax. It'll help with conception," she suggested one day. "Maybe Emma should quit her job, reduce the stress," she said on another occasion. It felt like she was dictating our life, and David was letting her. I started feeling like a stranger in my own marriage. The love and understanding that had once bonded David and me seemed to be slipping away, lost in the shadow of Barbara's overbearing presence. The constant pressure about having a baby started to take its toll on both of us. David and I were arguing more often, and the romance that once filled our home seemed to have evaporated. Still, amidst all this, I held on to the hope that things would get better, that we'd find our way back to each other. But then came the day that changed everything. David came home late one evening, looking more downcast than usual. I was in the kitchen, trying to fix us a quick dinner. "David, is everything okay?" I asked, concerned. He slumped into a chair at the kitchen table, burying his face in his hands. "We need to talk, Emma." That tone in his voice sent a chill down my spine. I sat across from him, my heart pounding. "It's about us. Trying to have a baby," he started, not meeting my eyes. "What about it?" I asked, a knot forming in my stomach. "We went to the doctor, remember? For those tests?" he said, finally looking up at me. I nodded. A few weeks ago, we had gone for a fertility checkup, hoping it would put Barbara's nagging to rest. David took a deep breath. "The results came in today. It's not you, Emma. It's me." I felt a mix of emotions: relief, sadness, and confusion. "What do you mean?" "The doctor said I have a low sperm count. It's unlikely that I can father a child," he said, his voice breaking. I reached for his hand, trying to offer some comfort. "David, it's okay. We can figure this out together. Maybe there's treatment or other options." He pulled his hand away, shaking his head. "No, you don't understand. I won't go through any treatment. It's just not something I can do." I was stunned. "But why? If there's a chance." "It's my decision, Emma. I just can't," he said firmly. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The man I loved, who always seemed so strong and confident, was giving up without even trying. "David, please, don't let this come between us. We can work through it," I pleaded. He stood up, avoiding my gaze. "I need some time alone to think about all this." And just like that, he walked out of the kitchen, leaving me sitting there, trying to process it all. I couldn't understand why he wouldn't even consider treatment. Was his pride more important than our chance to have a family? The next few days were like walking on eggshells. David barely spoke to me, and when he did, it was short and cold. I felt a growing distance between us, a crack in the foundation of our marriage that seemed to be widening with each passing day. Then came the day that turned the crack into a gaping hole. David had been out late again. I was in bed, pretending to be asleep when he came in. He thought I was asleep and started talking to someone on the phone. "Yes, Mom, I got the results. It's not good." "No, I don't want treatment." "I know, but I can't." "Yes, I'll figure something out." Hearing him talk to his mom about something so personal, something he barely discussed with me, felt like a betrayal. It was clear that Barbara's shadow loomed larger over our marriage than I had ever realized. I lay there in the dark, tears streaming down my face, feeling utterly alone. Our marriage was crumbling, and I didn't know how to save it. Life at home had become unbearable. David and I were like strangers, living under the same roof. The love and warmth that once defined our relationship seemed like a distant memory. But just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, life threw me a curveball. I had been feeling under the weather for a few days. At first, I thought it was just stress, but then I missed my period. A part of me was scared to even entertain the thought, but I knew I had to find out. So, one morning, I bought a pregnancy test. Sitting in the bathroom, waiting for the result felt like the longest few minutes of my life. And then, there it was. A positive result. I was pregnant. For a moment, I was in disbelief. After all the talk about David's infertility, this felt like a miracle. A ray of hope in the midst of our crumbling marriage. But how would David react? I decided to tell him that evening. He came home late, as usual, and barely acknowledged me. I took a deep breath and approached him. "David, we need to talk," I said, my voice trembling. He looked up, his expression weary. "What is it now, Emma?" "I'm pregnant," I blurted out. For a moment there was silence. Then he laughed, a bitter, cynical laugh. Pregnant? How? According to the doctors, I can't. I don't know, but the test is positive. We're going to have a baby, I said, tears welling up in my eyes. He stood up abruptly, anger flashing in his eyes. This is some kind of joke, right? You're trying to trap me? I was shocked. Trap you? David, I'm telling you we're going to have a baby. Our baby. He paced the room, running his hands through his hair. No, this can't be. You must have cheated. That's it, isn't it? You cheated on me. I felt like I had been slapped. Cheated? How can you even say that? I've been nothing but faithful to you. He wasn't listening. He was too consumed by his own rage and disbelief. Get out. I want you out of this house, he yelled. David, please, let's talk about this. We can go to the doctor, get a confirmation, I pleaded. But it was like talking to a wall. He stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him. That night, I slept in the guest room, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. The next day, David was gone before I woke up. His mother, Barbara, showed up instead. The look on her face was a mix of anger and disgust. You should be ashamed of yourself, Emma. Trapping my son with another man's child, she spat. I didn't cheat on David. This child is his. I defended myself. She laughed, a cold, mocking laugh. Do you take me for a fool? My son can't have children. You're just a gold digger, trying to secure your future. I was stunned by her cruelty. This is David's child. I've never been with anyone else. She moved closer, her voice venomous. You have 1 week to pack your things and leave. And don't even think about asking for alimony or child support. You won't get a dime from us. The ultimatum from Barbara was the last straw. I knew I couldn't continue living in a house filled with resentment and accusations. It was time to take control of my life, for my sake and for the baby's. First things first, I filed for divorce. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was necessary. David and his mother tried to make it difficult. They wanted a piece of everything I had, claiming it was their right. But I had a strong case. Everything I owned, all my savings and property, were mine long before David entered my life. Their attempts to grab what wasn't theirs failed miserably. As for alimony, I didn't ask for a penny. I wanted no financial ties to David. No reason for him or his mother to interfere in my life again. I was determined to start anew, free from their toxicity. I found a modest apartment, not too fancy, but cozy enough to be a fresh start. Packing up my things from the house was bittersweet. Every photo, every piece of furniture had a memory attached to it, but I was ready to leave them behind. The day I moved out, David was conspicuously absent. Maybe he couldn't face me, or perhaps he just didn't care. Either way, it didn't matter. I left the keys on the counter and closed that chapter of my life. The first few nights in my new apartment were the hardest. The silence was overwhelming, and the reality of my situation often brought me to tears. But I found solace in the little life growing inside me. Talking to my unborn child became a nightly ritual, filling the emptiness with hope and love. Gradually, life in my new apartment started to feel less like a refuge and more like a home. I found comfort in my routine, and the bond with my unborn child grew stronger each day. One afternoon, as I was sorting through some old things, I found a photo of David and me from happier times. A pang of sadness hit me, but it was quickly replaced by a sense of relief. That chapter of my life was over. Then my phone rang. It was David. Emma, I've received the divorce papers, he said, his voice emotionless. I'm glad they reached you. Please take care of the formalities, I responded calmly. There was a pause before he added, I won't bother you about the baby. You won't hear from me again. It was a cold goodbye, but it was closure. As I hung up, I realized that in my solitude, I had found an inner strength I never knew I had. I was ready to face the future, not as David's estranged wife, but as a strong, independent woman and a loving mother. It was a quiet evening, and I was sitting on the couch, browsing through a magazine while Jacob, my 4-year-old son, played with his toys on the floor. The peace was interrupted by a sudden knock on the door. Puzzled, I went to answer it, wondering who it could be at this hour. Standing there was a woman I barely recognized, but her eyes held a familiar sorrow. Hi, Emma. It's been a long time, she said hesitantly. It took me a moment, but then I recognized her as Linda. a friend I had known through my ex-husband. Linda, yes, it has been. What brings you here? She shifted uncomfortably, looking past me at Jacob, who was now peeking around my legs. I thought you should know about David. David. Just hearing his name after all these years sent a chill down my spine. What about him? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Linda sighed. He's not doing well, Emma. After you left, things went downhill for him. He became an alcoholic. He remarried a few years ago and had a child, but the boy was born with disabilities. David couldn't handle it. He left them, divorced his wife, and now he's refusing to pay child support. He's in legal trouble. The news hit me hard, but not in the way Linda might have expected. I felt a deep sadness, not for David, but for his child and the woman he had left behind. That's terrible, I said softly. Linda nodded. I thought you should know. Given your past with him, I appreciated her concern, but knew I had to set boundaries. Thank you for telling me, Linda, but that part of my life is over. David made his choices, and they have nothing to do with me or my son. Linda looked at Jacob, then back at me. I understand, Emma. I just thought... I smiled, albeit a little sadly. I appreciate it, Linda, but my focus is on Jacob and our life now. What David does or doesn't do isn't my concern anymore. She nodded, seemingly understanding. I hope you and Jacob are happy, Emma. You both deserve it. Thank you, we are. I glanced at Jacob, who was now fully engrossed in his toys again. And I intend to keep it that way. After Linda left, I closed the door and leaned against it for a moment, taking deep breaths. The past had a way of sneaking up on you, but I was determined not to let it overshadow the life I had built for myself and my son. The park was vibrant that day, with laughter and the sounds of children playing. I was there with Jacob, my heart swelling with pride as I watched him run around. Then, a familiar, unwelcome voice sliced through the air. Emma, is that you? I turned, my heart sinking. Barbara, my former mother-in-law, was approaching, her eyes fixed on Jacob. Barbara? I said coolly. What are you doing here? Ignoring my tone, her gaze was locked on Jacob. He's grown so much. He's your son, right? Yes, this is Jacob, I answered, moving subtly to stand between her and my son. Barbara's eyes sparkled with a disturbing kind of eagerness. I was hoping to see him. After all, he's my grandson. I felt a wave of anger. And why would you want to see him? Well, you know, my other grandson. She trailed off, her face twisting. He's not... Well, he's sick. It's just not the same. I want to be part of a healthy grandchild's life. Her words struck me like a slap. The contempt in her voice for her own grandchild was appalling. Barbara, I said, my voice steely, you have no right to be part of Jacob's life. Not after everything that happened. But Emma, that was all David's doing, she protested. I shook my head. You supported him. You turned against me when I was carrying your grandchild. And now you speak with such disgust about your other grandson just because he's sick. That's unforgivable. Barbara's face reddened. You can't keep me away from my grandson. I can, and I will, I declared firmly. Jacob doesn't need someone in his life who values people based on their health. He will not be part of your twisted view of family. She looked like she was about to argue, but I cut her off. This conversation is over. Stay away from us, Barbara. Your presence is neither wanted nor welcomed. I took Jacob's hand and walked away, leaving Barbara standing alone, her face a mix of anger and disbelief. As we walked, Jacob looked up at me, his innocent eyes filled with questions. Mommy, who was that lady? That was someone we used to know, sweetheart, I replied gently, but she's not part of our lives anymore. Sitting on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky with warm colors, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. Jacob was inside, his laughter echoing as he played. Life had settled into a calm rhythm, the storms of the past now distant memories. Mom, look what I made. Jacob's voice pulled me back from my thoughts. He came running out, holding a drawing in his hands. It was a picture of the two of us, smiling under a big, bright sun. It's beautiful, Jacob, I said, pulling him into a hug. You're quite the artist. He beamed with pride. I want to put it on the fridge. Let's do that, I smiled, following him inside. As we walked, I thought about how far we'd come. There was a time when the weight of the past felt crushing, but now it seemed like a distant echo. Later that evening, after Jacob was asleep, I sat down with a cup of tea, reflecting on everything. The phone rang, disrupting the quiet. I hesitated but decided to answer it. "Hello?" It was my sister Anna. "Hey Emma, I just wanted to check in. How are you and Jacob doing?" "We're doing well, Anna. Jacob's growing up so fast," I replied, a smile in my voice. "I heard about your run-in with Barbara." "Are you okay?" she asked, concern lacing her words. I sighed. "Yeah, it was unexpected, but I'm okay. It's just a reminder of the past. I know it's tough, but you've come so far, Emma. You're strong, and you've built a wonderful life for you and Jacob," she said encouragingly. Her words warmed my heart. "Thanks, Anna. It means a lot." We talked for a while longer, about small things, everyday life. It was comforting, this connection with my sister, a reminder of the support system I had. After hanging up, I went to the living room where Jacob's drawing was displayed on the fridge. Looking at it, I realized how much we had both grown. The pain and anger of the past had faded, leaving room for healing and new beginnings. I walked to Jacob's room, watching him sleep peacefully. Leaning down, I kissed his forehead gently. "Good night, my little artist," I whispered. Back on the porch, I gazed at the stars emerging in the night sky. The echoes of the past were fading, their hold on me loosening. In their place was hope, a quiet strength, and the unconditional love between a mother and her son.
It was just another shift at the hospital. My name's Eliza Bennett, a 40-year-old ER nurse who's seen it all. I like my job, even though it's tough sometimes. The hospital's short on specialists, so I often pull double duty, working in the ER and wherever else I'm needed. Tonight, I was in the ER, same as always. My husband, Michael? Well, he's been busy building his political career, working as an assistant to the mayor. We don't talk much about my work. He's not too interested. We've been living our separate lives under the same roof, each absorbed in our own worlds. We never had kids. I wanted them for a long time, but it just didn't happen. Eventually, Michael told me he was fine without children. He said he liked the quiet, so it's just been the two of us, living in a kind of silent agreement. The ER was buzzing with the usual chaos, nurses and doctors rushing around, the constant beeping of machines. I was checking on a patient when I heard the ambulance siren. It was a call from a residential area, something about a sick baby. I've always had a soft spot for kids, so I volunteered to go. My colleague, John, was driving the ambulance. He's a good guy, always has a joker ready to lighten the mood. We've worked together for years. "Ready for another adventure, Elisa?" John asked as we hopped into the ambulance. "Always," I replied with a half smile. We chatted about trivial things on the way, the weather, a new restaurant in town. It was a way to keep the tension at bay, to stay calm before facing whatever awaited us. The address led us to a fancy neighborhood, the kind where each house looked like it could be on a postcard. John whistled as we pulled up to a large, well-lit house. "Someone's doing well for themselves," he commented. I just nodded, grabbing my medical bag. We were met at the door by a young woman, probably in her early 20s. She was holding a baby, and I could see the worry etched on her face. "Please, help my baby. He's got a fever, and he won't stop crying," she pleaded, her voice cracking with emotion. "Let's take a look," I said, trying to sound reassuring. Her mother, an older woman with kind eyes, stood by her side. I could see where the young woman got her looks. They led us into a spacious living room where I began examining the baby. I didn't know it then, but that night was going to change everything. My ordinary life was about to get a whole lot more complicated. As I examined the baby, I could tell something was wrong. He was burning up with fever and seemed to be having spasms. I needed to act fast. "John, we need to cool him down now," I said urgently. John nodded, quickly understanding the situation. Got it, Eliza. I'll get some ice packs and a cool cloth. While John fetched the supplies, I turned to the young woman. I'm Eliza. What's your baby's name? She was on the verge of tears. His name is Liam. He was fine this afternoon, and then suddenly, it's okay, I said gently. We're going to take care of Liam. John came back with the ice packs and a cloth. We worked together, trying to bring down Liam's fever. The young woman, who I learned was named Sophia, and her mother watched us, anxiety written all over their faces. Is he going to be okay? Sophia's mother asked. She was trying to stay strong, but I could hear the worry in her voice. We're doing everything we can, I assured her. After a few tense minutes, Liam's fever started to come down. He stopped convulsing and began to calm. Relief washed over Sophia's face. Thank you, she whispered. We should still get him to a hospital to be checked over, I suggested. Better safe than sorry. Sophia nodded. Of course, whatever he needs. As we prepared to move Liam, the front door opened. I didn't pay it much attention until I heard a familiar voice. What's going on here? Sophia, are you okay? I froze. That voice. I'd know it anywhere. It was Michael, my husband. I turned slowly, and there he was, standing in the doorway. Our eyes met, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. Eliza, what are you doing here? Michael's voice was a mix of surprise and something else. Fear, maybe. I could ask you the same question, I said, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside me. Sophia looked from Michael to me and back again. You two know each other? Michael opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked like a deer caught in headlights. Eliza is my wife, he finally managed to say. I confirmed, yes, I am his wife. The room went silent. Sophia's eyes widened, and her mother let out a gasp. I could feel John's eyes on me, full of questions. Your wife? Sophia's voice was barely a whisper. She looked at Michael, hurt and confusion written all over her face. Michael didn't answer. He just stood there, looking like he wished the ground would swallow him up. In that moment, I realized my ordinary life was over. Everything had changed, and there was no going back. The room was thick with tension. I couldn't believe Michael was here, in this house, with Sophia and her baby. I felt like I was in some kind of bad dream. Sophia was the first to break the silence. Michael, why is she calling you her husband? Michael finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Sophia, I can explain. Explain? Sophia's voice rose. Explain why my baby's nurse is claiming to be your wife. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, waiting for my response. I took a deep breath. Because I am his wife. We've been married for 10 years. Sophia's face crumpled. But you told me you were divorced. Michael ran a hand through his hair, looking desperate. I know, and I'm sorry. I was going to tell you, You just what? Sophia's mother cut in, her voice sharp. Lied to my daughter, to us? John, who had been silent until now, spoke up. Maybe we should give you some space to talk this out. I nodded, grateful for his intervention. Yes, we should go. Liam's stable, but he still needs to be seen at the hospital. As John and I started to move Liam's carrier, the front door opened again. Another surprise. This time, an older man walked in. I recognized him immediately. Mayor Thomas Harrington, Michael's boss. What's all this commotion? The mayor asked, looking around the room. Sophia rushed to him. Dad, this is complicated. The mayor's eyes landed on Michael. Michael, what's going on? Before Michael could respond, Sophia blurted out, Michael's married, Dad, and he lied to me about it. The mayor's expression turned from confusion to anger. Married? Is this true, Michael? Michael nodded, unable to meet the mayor's gaze. Yes, sir, it's true. I could see the wheels turning in the mayor's head. "And you're his wife?" he asked, looking at me. "Yes, I am," I confirmed. The mayor shook his head. "I can't believe this. Michael, you've been working for me for over a year, and I had no idea." Michael tried to say something, but the mayor held up a hand to stop him. "Save it. I need some time to process this." Sophia was crying now, her mother comforting her. The mayor looked at his daughter and granddaughter with a mixture of sadness and anger. I felt like I was watching everything from a distance. This was my life falling apart, but it felt like a scene from a TV show. As John and I finally left the house with Liam, I couldn't help but glance back. Michael was standing there looking lost. Part of me felt sorry for him, but another part of me was angry, so very angry. I had no idea what was going to happen next. All I knew was that my ordinary life was gone, replaced by something much messier and more complicated. After dropping Liam off at the hospital and making sure he was in good hands, I couldn't stop thinking about everything that had happened. I needed answers. I needed to talk to Michael. I drove home, my mind racing. When I got there, Michael's car was in the driveway. I took a deep breath and went inside. Michael was sitting at the kitchen table, looking like he hadn't moved since he got home. He looked up when I came in, his expression a mix of guilt and fear. "Eliza, He started, but trailed off. I sat down across from him. "I want to know everything, Michael. How long has this been going on? Why did you lie to her? To me?" Michael took a deep breath. "It started a year ago, at a work event. I met Sophia and we hit it off. I know I should have told her the truth, but I saw an opportunity." Opportunity? I couldn't hide the hurt in my voice. With her being the mayor's daughter, I thought... He paused, struggling to find the words. I thought it could help my career. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. "So, our marriage, our life together, it meant nothing to you?" "It's not like that, Eliza. I do care about you, but I felt stuck. I thought I needed more." "And a baby. Did you plan that too?" My voice was rising now, anger mixing with the hurt. "No, that was an accident. But when Sophia told me, I thought maybe it could all work out. I could have this new life." "A new life?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "And what about our life? What about me?" Michael looked down, unable to meet my eyes. "I don't know. I thought maybe we could get a divorce, and it would be better for both of us." "So, you were just going to leave me? After 10 years? I was going to talk to you about it. I just needed to figure things out first." I shook my head, feeling a mix of sadness and disbelief. "You were going to leave me and marry her, weren't you?" Michael didn't answer, but he didn't need to. I knew the truth. "I can't believe this," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I can't believe you would do this to me." "I'm sorry, Eliza. I never meant to hurt you." "Sorry doesn't fix this, Michael. You've lied to me, to Sophia, to everyone, and now everything's falling apart." Michael looked like he wanted to say more, but I stood up. "I need some time to think, to figure out what I'm going to do." As I walked away, I could feel Michael's eyes on me, but I didn't look back. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions, but one thing was clear. Everything had changed, and there was no going back. The next few days were a blur. I went to work, but my mind was elsewhere. Michael tried to talk to me, but I couldn't deal with it. Not yet. Then, one evening, I found myself at Sophia's doorstep. I needed to talk to her, to understand her side of the story. I rang the bell, and after a moment, she opened the door. "Eliza?" Sophia looked surprised to see me. "I think we need to talk," I said. She hesitated, but then nodded, stepping aside to let me in. We sat down in her living room, an awkward silence hanging in the air. "Why are you here?" Sophia finally asked. "I want to understand. What did Michael tell you about us?" Sophia took a deep breath. He said he was divorced, that he'd been single for a while. I had no idea about you until you showed up that night. I nodded, feeling a pang of sadness. And the baby? Liam? She looked down, tears welling in her eyes. He was a surprise. Michael said we could be a family, that he wanted to be there for us. I believed him. I could hear the pain in her voice, and despite everything, I felt sorry for her. I'm sorry, Sophia. I'm sorry he lied to both of us. She wiped her eyes. I'm sorry too. I never wanted to be part of something like this. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the situation pressing down on us. Did you love him? I asked, not sure if I wanted to know the answer. Sophia looked up, her expression sad. I thought I did. But now, I don't know what to believe. He lied about everything. I nodded, understanding all too well. Yeah, I get that. We talked for a while longer, sharing our stories, our confusion, our pain. It was strange, talking like this with the other woman, but it was also comforting in a way. When I left, I felt a little lighter, like I'd let go of some of the anger and hurt. It wasn't gone, not by a long shot, but it was a start. As I drove home, I thought about Michael, about our marriage, about everything that had happened. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew I couldn't stay in limbo forever. I needed to make a decision, for my sake and for my future. The weeks following the revelation of Michael's betrayal felt like a stormy sea, each day tossing me between waves of anger, disbelief, and an unexpected sense of liberation. As I braced myself for the legal battles ahead, the reality of the situation became crystal clear. It was me and Mayor Harrington versus Michael. The day of the trial dawned like any other, but with a weight that felt like a heavy cloud hanging over me. Walking into the courtroom, I was a mix of nerves and determination. Mayor Harrington gave me a nod of solidarity as we took our seats. The courtroom buzzed with the quiet chatter of spectators and the shuffling of papers. When Michael walked in, escorted by his lawyer, my heart raced. He avoided eye contact, but I could feel the tension between us. The trial began with the mayor's case. His lawyer presented evidence of Michael's deception, how he had lied about being divorced and manipulated Sophia, the mayor's daughter. Photographs, texts, and emails painted a clear picture of Michael's duplicity. Mayor Harrington himself took the stand, his disappointment and anger toward Michael evident in his testimony. Sophia also testified, her voice trembling as she recounted the lies Michael had fed her. Then, it was my turn. My lawyer laid out the case against Michael, highlighting his infidelity and deceit. I took the stand, my hands shaking slightly. The lawyer asked me to recount how I discovered Michael's affair and the events that followed. As a nurse, I am trained to stay calm in emergencies, I began, my voice steady. But nothing could have prepared me for the shock of finding my husband with another woman and a child he had kept hidden from me. The courtroom was silent, hanging on my every word. I spoke about our marriage, the struggles, and how Michael's ambition had slowly overshadowed our relationship. When it was Michael's turn, his defense seemed weak. His lawyer tried to downplay the situation, suggesting misunderstandings and miscommunications. But the evidence was overwhelming. Michael himself stumbled through his testimony, his excuses sounding hollow and insincere. As the trial proceeded, I felt a growing sense of empowerment. For years, I had lived in the shadow of Michael's ambitions, but here, in this courtroom, I was reclaiming my life. Finally, the judge delivered the verdict. Michael was found guilty of fraud and deceit in both cases. There was a murmur in the courtroom, a mix of satisfaction and disbelief. As we exited the courtroom, reporters swarmed around, but I declined to comment. This victory was not about public attention. It was personal, a step towards healing and moving on. Driving home, the weight of the past weeks began to lift. I knew there would be challenges ahead, but for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of hope. The trial had not just been about legal justice, it was a journey to self-discovery and reclaiming the narrative of my own life. That evening, as I sat quietly at home, I realized the trial was more than a closure. It was the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter where I was not just a spectator in my life, but the author of my own story. The trial was over, but its ripples were still felt in every corner of my life. The legal victory was clear, but the emotional landscape was more complicated. I had won, but at what cost? The weeks following the trial were a blur. I threw myself into work, finding solace in the routine of my shifts at the hospital. It was during one of these shifts that I ran into Sophia, the mayor's daughter, in the hospital corridor. "Hey," she said quietly, her eyes reflecting a shared understanding of pain and betrayal. "Hi, Sophia," I replied. "How are you holding up?" "It's been tough," she admitted, cradling her baby in her arms. "But I'm managing. And you?" "Day by day," I said, offering a small smile. "Taking it day by day." We exchanged a few more words before parting ways, a silent acknowledgement of the strange bond that now linked us. Back at home, the loneliness of the empty house sometimes felt overwhelming. I had grown used to Michael's absence, but the finality of the divorce brought a new kind of solitude. It was during these quiet moments that I would often find myself reflecting on the past, on the choices I had made, and the ones that had been made for me. One evening, as I was sorting through old papers, I came across an envelope addressed to me. It was from Michael. My first instinct was to throw it away, but curiosity got the better of me. As I read his letter, his words of apology and explanation felt empty. He talked about his mistakes, his regrets, and his desire to make things right. But it was too little, too late. I crumpled the letter and tossed it into the trash, feeling a surge of anger, and then, surprisingly, a sense of release. Michael was part of my past, but he would not define my future. A few days later, I received a call from Mayor Harrington. He wanted to meet for coffee, to thank me personally for my courage during the trial. Sitting across from him in the small cafe, I felt a sense of respect for the man who had stood by his daughter and supported me through the legal ordeal. "Thank you for meeting me, Eliza," he said, his voice sincere. "Your strength during the trial was admirable." "I did what I had to do," I replied, stirring my coffee, "for myself and for Sophia. I want you to know that the City Council is here to support you," he continued. "If there's anything you need, don't hesitate to reach out." I nodded, appreciative of his offer, but determined to stand on my own 2 feet. As I walked back home, I realized that the aftermath of the trial was not just about picking up the pieces, it was about building something new. My marriage to Michael had ended, but my life was still very much in progress. In the following weeks, I made a conscious decision to focus on myself. I reconnected with old friends, took up new hobbies, and even began considering furthering my education in nursing. The journey was not easy. There were days of doubt and moments of loneliness. But there was also a newfound sense of freedom and possibility. I was no longer tied to Mikhail's ambitions or his betrayals. I was my own person, with my own path to forge. As I look back on that tumultuous time, I realize that the aftermath was not just about recovering from a betrayal. It was about rediscovering who I was and what I wanted out of life. It was about learning to stand alone, not as a victim, but as a survivor, ready to face whatever the future might hold.
From the moment I met Jake, I knew our lives would be a roller coaster. I was always the type to plan everything out. By the time I turned 28, I had a stable job as a lawyer, a nice apartment, and a clear idea of where I wanted my life to go. Financial stability was important to me, and I prided myself on my ability to manage my finances. Jake, on the other hand, was a whirlwind. The first time we met, he had this infectious energy about him that drew me in. He was a tall man with messy brown hair and a carefree smile that could melt anyone's heart. We met at a mutual friend's party. I was discussing a recent case I had won at work, and Jake walked over, drink in hand. "So, you're the famous lawyer Rachel everyone's talking about," he said with a smirk. I raised an eyebrow. "And who might you be?" "The guy who's about to change your life." He winked. Laughing, I replied, "That's a bold statement, but sure, I'll bite. Tell me, how do you plan on doing that?" Over the next few hours, we talked about everything, from our childhood memories to our future dreams. He told me about his love for adventure and how he often went on spontaneous trips just because he felt like it. He said he believed in living in the moment and enjoying every second of life. I found his perspective refreshing. Here I was, someone who always planned ahead, and then there was Jake, someone who took each day as it came. Over the next few months, our relationship blossomed. He introduced me to a world of spontaneity, and I brought a bit of order to his chaos. Our dates were always full of surprises. One day, he would take me out for a fancy dinner, and the next, we would be on a random road trip to nowhere. It wasn't just the fun times that made me fall for him. It was also the way he cared for me. He would always make sure I was okay, and he had this unique ability to make me feel special. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, I came home to find my apartment filled with candles and roses. Jake stood in the middle of the room, a huge grin on his face. "Thought you could use a little pick-me-up," he said. I smiled. "You always know how to make a bad day better." We settled into a routine, and before I knew it, we were talking about moving in together and even getting married. Our relationship had its challenges, especially when it came to our different views on money. I was always careful with my spending, while Jake was more impulsive. "Come on, let's just book that trip to Europe," he would often say. I would reply, "We need to plan it out, Jake. We can't just spend without thinking." He would just roll his eyes. "You worry too much." Despite our differences, we loved each other deeply. So, when he proposed, I said yes without hesitation. I believed that love could overcome any obstacle, and I was ready to start a new chapter of my life with Jake. Meeting the in-laws is always a nerve-wracking experience, but when Jake asked me to join a family dinner, I wasn't just nervous, I was curious. I had already heard snippets about Jake's family and their money habits, and I was eager to get the full picture. Their house was a large, sprawling mansion on the outskirts of the city. As we drove up the long driveway, I noticed the numerous cars parked outside, many of which looked brand new. As we entered, I was greeted with a loud cheer from Jake's relatives. They were a lively bunch, and the house was filled with laughter and chatter. Jake's mother, Linda, was a petite woman with a warm smile. She hugged me tightly and said, "It's so good to finally meet you." I smiled back. "Thank you for having me." Jake's father, Mark, was a tall, broad-shouldered man with a booming voice. "So, you're the lawyer who's captured our Jake's heart," he chuckled, shaking my hand firmly. "It seems that way," I laughed. Dinner was a grand affair. The table was laden with dishes, and wine glasses clinked cheerfully. As we ate, I observed the dynamics of Jake's family. They talked about their recent purchases and the vacations they had been on, or were planning to go on. Money seemed to flow freely in their conversations, and I got the sense that they didn't think twice before spending. Linda mentioned a recent shopping spree in Paris. Mark spoke of a new business venture that required a significant investment. Their younger daughter, Sarah, excitedly chatted about her plans to study abroad. At one point, Jake's older sister, Emily, turned to me. "So, how do you manage your finances? Being a lawyer, you must be earning a lot." I hesitated for a moment before answering. "I try to save and invest wisely. It's important to have a financial safety net." Jake jumped in. "She's the practical one in our relationship." Emily laughed. "Sounds like you two balance each other out." The evening went on, and I could feel the difference in our lifestyles. While I was always cautious about spending, Jake's family seemed to have a live for today mentality. It was clear that they enjoyed the finer things in life and didn't hesitate to indulge. As the night drew to a close, Linda pulled me aside. "You know, dear," she began, "Jake is lucky to have you, but do let him have his fun. Money is meant to be enjoyed. I nodded politely. Of course. I just believe in being careful. She patted my hand. Balance is key. As Jake and I drove back home, the weight of our differences hung in the air. I turned to him. Your family is lovely, but we have very different views on money. Jake sighed. I know, but love is about compromise, right? I smiled. Yes, but compromise doesn't mean losing oneself. Jake reached over and squeezed my hand. We'll figure it out. But deep down, I couldn't shake off the feeling that our financial differences, combined with the influence of Jake's family, would soon lead to challenges that neither of us were prepared for. And so it happened. We were barely through the front door when the tension in Jake's family home became apparent. The large living room, which I remembered as a place of laughter and chatter during our last visit, was now filled with anxious faces. Everyone was there. Jake's parents, his siblings, and most notably, his younger brother Ryan. I had always found Ryan a bit unpredictable. He was the sort of person who took chances, always believing the next big break was just around the corner. That day, he looked restless, his eyes darting around the room, avoiding direct contact. Without much preamble, Linda, Jake's mother, began, "Thank you for coming on such short notice. We have a serious situation on our hands." Ryan, with a sigh, came forward. "I messed up. I owe the bank $100,000. They're saying they'll take legal action if I don't pay soon." The room erupted in a flurry of questions and exclaims. Jake's hand tightened around mine. He looked more shocked than anyone. Mark, Jake's father, rubbed his temples. "Ryan, we always warned you about getting involved in those sketchy deals." Ryan snapped back. "I thought they were good investments." Seeing where the discussion might be heading, Linda tried to refocus the group. "The blame game won't help. We need to find a solution." Emily, Jake's sister, interjected, "Why don't we all chip in? If we pool our resources, we might cover most of it." Mark sighed. "Most of our money is tied up. We can't pull out that kind of cash right now." Then, all eyes turned to me. I felt trapped, like a deer in headlights. I sensed what was coming next. Jake, squeezing my hand tighter, spoke up. "You've got savings, right? We can use that to help Ryan out." I looked at him in disbelief. Was he seriously suggesting this? Linda's eyes brightened. "Oh, that would be wonderful. Can you help, dear?" I tried to remain calm. "Jake, we've talked about being careful with our finances. My savings are for our future." Jake's face reddened. "This is family. Don't you care about my brother?" Ryan nodded. "Yeah, aren't we supposed to be family now? Or does money matter more to you?" Feeling cornered, I replied, "I understand this is a tough situation, but why should I hand over my hard-earned savings when there might be other solutions? Maybe I can help negotiate with the bank? Work out a plan?" Jake's voice grew louder. "This isn't the time for legal advice. Ryan needs help now." Linda chimed in, with an edge to her voice. "We thought family meant something to you. Guess we were wrong." The room felt stifling, the weight of their expectations and accusations pressing down on me. I had hoped Jake would be my ally, but he seemed to have chosen his family's side. The meeting ended with no resolution. As Jake and I walked back to the car, I felt a chasm growing between us. The dawning light had always been a comforting sight, but this morning its warmth was overshadowed by a chilling discovery. Glancing at my phone, I saw an alarming bank notification. My heart thudded heavily as I saw the staggering amount. $150,000 had been transferred out of my savings, and even more shockingly, it had been sent to Jake's account. Confusion and dread wrapped around me. This couldn't be right. Without hesitation, I tried calling Jake, but he didn't answer. I sent a message. "Jake, why is there $150,000 transferred to your account? We need to talk. Now." Time ticked by, and every silent moment only amplified my anxiety. He didn't respond. The swirling unease forced me into action, and I decided to confront him at his workplace. As I approached his office, I saw his empty desk. One of his colleagues, Sarah, looked up and said, "Looking for Jake? He's taken the day off. Some personal matters," he mentioned. I muttered a thanks, my thoughts racing even faster now. With growing dread, I decided to go to his parents' place. Perhaps they knew something, or perhaps they could get Jake to talk to me. The large wooden door of their house looked more imposing than ever. I knocked assertively. After a brief moment, Linda, Jake's mother, opened the door just a crack. Her guarded expression told me she was aware of something. "I need to speak to Jake," I demanded. Linda glanced behind her, hesitating. "Jake isn't here," she replied. "Where is he? He's taken a huge amount from our joint savings. I need answers." Her face remained passive. "I don't know about any money," she claimed, but her eyes darted away. "Let me in. We need to discuss this," I insisted. But instead of yielding, she firmly stated, "I think it's best if you leave," and shut the door in my face. The blatant act left me stunned. Standing there, I realized the gravity of the betrayal. They knew, and they were covering for him. The reception area of the police station was bustling. Uniformed officers moved to and fro, the hum of conversation punctuated by the ring of phones. I approached the front desk, where an officer sat, looking engrossed in paperwork. "Excuse me," I began, my voice slightly shaky. "I need to report a significant unauthorized transaction from my bank account. It's my husband." The officer, whose name tag read Perez, looked up, her eyes filled with understanding. "Take a seat." She gestured to the chairs nearby. "I'll call someone to assist you." Sitting down, my thoughts swirled. Was I really about to report my own husband? Before I could contemplate further, a tall officer approached me. "Mrs. Collins?" he asked. I nodded. "Yes, that's me." "I'm Officer Daniels. Officer Perez informed me about your situation. Let's go to my office where we can talk." We walked down a corridor, and he gestured to a chair opposite his desk. As I explained the situation to him, I noticed his brows furrow in concern. "So, you believe your husband took this money without your consent?" I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Yes, and his family seems to be in on it. They shut me out when I went to confront them." Officer Daniels jotted down notes. "Do you have any evidence of this transaction?" I pulled out my phone and showed him the bank notification and the message I had sent Jake, as well as his vague reply. Officer Daniels looked at the screen, his expression serious. "This certainly helps, but it's going to be a complicated case, given that he's your husband. Do you wish to press charges?" Taking a deep breath, I responded, "Yes, I do. I feel betrayed and violated. I need to stand up for myself." He nodded. "I understand. We'll start the process. It may take time, but we'll support you every step of the way." "Thank you," I whispered, tears threatening to spill. Officer Daniels extended a comforting hand. "It's tough, I know, but you're doing the right thing. We'll get to the bottom of this." The courtroom was a daunting place, its high ceilings echoing the whispers of the people inside. Rows of wooden benches filled with friends, family, reporters, and strangers who had taken an interest in the case. The tension was palpable. I sat on one side, dressed conservatively, my best friend Sarah by my side for support. Across the room, Jake sat with his parents. He avoided making eye contact with me. The judge, a stern-looking woman with gray hair tied back neatly, cleared her throat, signaling the start of the proceedings. "Order in the court," she declared. The prosecution began by detailing the charges against Jake: the unauthorized transaction, the evasion when confronted, and the role of Jake's family in possibly abetting the crime. It was painful to relive the betrayal as the evidence was presented. Bank statements, my call records, and the security footage from Jake's parents' home on the day I confronted them. Then it was Jake's turn to testify. He stood, looking much smaller than I remembered. "Your Honor, I admit to transferring the money, but I did it out of desperation. My family was drowning in debt. I thought if I took the money, it would fix everything. I planned to return it." I clenched my fists. He was playing the victim card. The prosecutor spoke up. "Mr. Collins, did you discuss this with your wife before taking such a drastic step?" Jake hesitated. "No, I thought she wouldn't understand." The prosecutor raised an eyebrow. "So, you decided stealing was the better option?" Jake lowered his gaze. "I made a mistake." The trial went on for hours. Witnesses were called, statements were read. When the time came for me to testify, I felt a lump in my throat. With every ounce of strength, I recounted the events, the betrayal, the pain of being shut out by someone I had once loved. Sarah was called up next. She spoke of my character, my hard work, my dedication to building a life with Jake, and the anguish I had experienced when discovering the betrayal. When the closing statements were made, the room held its collective breath. The judge, after taking her time, declared, "Mr. Collins, you've admitted to your crime, and while I understand your intent was not malicious, the act was a clear violation of trust. You will return the full amount of $150,000 to Mrs. Collins immediately and pay an additional fine for this unauthorized transaction." Jake's face went pale. His parents seemed equally shocked. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "I advise both parties to consider mediation to resolve any personal disputes." As I left the courtroom, I felt a mixture of relief and sadness. Justice had been served, but at what cost? The man I had once dreamt of building a life with was now a stranger, a criminal in my eyes. After the court proceedings, my mind kept going back to one thing. How did Jake's family end up in such a mess in the first place? And why was I, a mere bystander in their family affairs, paying the price? My curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to find out the root cause. The first person I thought to reach out to was Amanda, Jake's ex-girlfriend from before we met. She had once mentioned how Jake's family had a penchant for shady dealings. Back then, I had dismissed her words as jealousy, but now I wondered if there was some truth to it. I dialed her number, half expecting her not to pick up, but she did. "Hello? Hey, Amanda, it's Rachel. I know it's been a while, but I wanted to talk." She paused, then replied, "About Jake?" "Yes." We met up at a quiet coffee shop the next day. Amanda looked different, more mature and composed than I remembered. After exchanging pleasantries, I got straight to the point. "Amanda, you once told me about Jake's family, about their dealings. I need to know more." She sighed, taking a sip of her coffee. "I wondered when you'd ask. Jake's family has been involved in some sketchy businesses for years. Loan sharking, shady investments, you name it. They've always been about quick money." I frowned, but Jake never seemed that way, at least not when we were dating. Amanda shook her head. He tried to distance himself from it, but family ties run deep, and when his brother got into that massive debt, he got sucked right back in. My heart sank. "So, all this time?" She nodded. "He's been trying to bail them out. I warned you, remember? I saw the signs, the desperation, the sneaky phone calls, but you were too in love to see." I stared down, fighting back tears. I can't believe I was so naive. She reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "You're not the first, and won't be the last. They're masters of manipulation." The conversation shifted, and I learned that Jake's brother had a gambling problem. The debts weren't from a failed business or medical emergency. They were from nights spent at underground gambling dens and high-stakes poker games. I thanked Amanda for her honesty and clarity. As I walked back to my car, everything made sense. The secrecy, the desperation, the betrayal. Jake's family was drowning, and in their desperation, they tried to drag me down with them. After the dust settled, one thing was clear to me. I needed to put the past firmly behind me. The first step was finalizing the divorce from Jake. It was a relatively quick process, given the circumstances. My lawyer, an old friend from law school, ensured that it went smoothly without me having to face Jake again. One evening, after a long day at work, I met up with some college friends for dinner. Sarah, always the one with the latest gossip, leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "You remember Jake's brother, right? Heard he's been locked up for fraud." I raised an eyebrow. "You're kidding." She shook her head. "Wish I was. Multiple counts of fraud and embezzlement. They say he'd been scamming people for years." Anna chimed in. "And that's not all. Jake's parents' property? Seized and auctioned off to clear their mounting debts." I took a deep breath, processing the information. It's just sad. That family had so many issues, so many problems. Sarah squeezed my hand. You dodged a bullet, girl, and look at you now, moving on, living your best life. I smiled, grateful for the support. Thanks, Sarah. It's been a journey, but I'm finding my way. Life continued. Days turned into weeks, and then months. The wounds of the past slowly began to heal, and I started building a life that was truly mine. One evening, as I was settling down with a book, my phone rang. An unfamiliar number flashed on the screen. I answered cautiously. Hello? Hey, it's Jake, came the hesitant voice. A chill ran down my spine. What do you want? He cleared his throat. Look, I know I've done wrong. I'm in a tough spot right now, financially. I was wondering if... No. I cut him off sharply. But I just need a little help to... No, Jake. You and your family have taken enough from me. I owe you nothing. I replied, my voice cold and firm. There was silence on the other end. Then, a soft, defeated, all right. I ended the call, feeling a mixture of anger and pity. But mostly, I felt relief. Relief that I had moved on, that I was no longer entangled in their web of deceit and drama. Over time, I immersed myself in work and spent quality time with friends and family who genuinely cared about me. I learned to value and trust myself more than ever, firmly believing that no matter what life threw my way, I would always come out stronger on the other side.
It felt like yesterday when I met Robert. It was at a charity event in the town hall. The place was buzzing with people, all dressed up, looking their best. I was there because I felt like I needed to be part of the community after moving to the town only a few months ago. Robert was there representing his family's business. Hi, I'm Robert, he introduced himself, extending his hand. His blue eyes looked genuine and friendly. Hi, Robert, I'm Clara, I replied, shaking his hand. We chatted about everything under the sun, from our childhood memories to our favorite movies. I found out that he had grown up in this town and had a family business here. I told him about my parents and how I lost them when I was just a kid. He listened intently, and I could feel he genuinely cared. I'm so sorry about your parents, he said sincerely. It must have been tough growing up without them. It was, I admitted, but their love always remained with me. Plus, I inherited a good amount from my father. It helps me remember them. As the night progressed, we found ourselves more and more engrossed in our conversation, completely oblivious to the hustle and bustle around us. Before we knew it, the event was wrapping up. Would you like to grab a coffee sometime? Robert asked, a hint of nervousness in his voice. I'd love to, I replied, smiling. Our coffee dates turned into dinner dates, and before we knew it, we were planning our wedding. It all happened so fast. I was 27, with an inheritance from my parents and a heart full of hope. Robert was everything I had ever wanted, or so I thought. After the wedding, I was introduced to his family. His dad, Mr. Lawson, was a gentle and warm man. The first time we met, he gave me a big hug and said, "Welcome to the family, dear. I hope you find all the happiness you deserve." Mrs. Lawson, on the other hand, was a stark contrast. She looked me up and down, her eyes cold and calculating. "I hope you know what you're getting into, marrying into our family," she said with a thinly veiled warning. Robert jumped in, trying to ease the tension. "Mom, be nice. Clara is my wife now, and I expect everyone to treat her with respect." In those early days, I tried to focus on the positive. I was in love, and I was hopeful that things would get better with time. Little did I know the roller coaster of events that awaited me in the next few chapters of my life. Several months into our marriage, things seemed to be going well. Robert and I had settled into a rhythm. We would often take evening walks, discussing our plans for the future. Our home was a cozy space that we both loved. One morning, I woke up feeling a little off. I was nauseous and had a strange feeling in my stomach. A few days later, the realization hit me. Could I be pregnant? I quickly bought a pregnancy test, and to my shock, it came out positive. I was flooded with a mix of emotions. While I was excited about the possibility of becoming a mother, I was also nervous about how Robert would react, especially considering his mom's clear disdain for me. That evening, after dinner, I decided to share the news. "Robert," I began, taking a deep breath, "I have something to tell you. I'm pregnant." He looked at me, and for a moment, his face was unreadable. Then, to my surprise and hurt, he said, "Is it even mine?" I was taken aback. "What? Of course it is. How can you even ask that?" He looked away, avoiding my gaze. "It's just... I don't know, Clara. Everything happened so fast. Our marriage and now this. I need some time to think." I tried to hold back my tears, feeling a mixture of anger and hurt. "Robert, I never expected this from you. This child is ours, and I hoped you'd be happy." He didn't reply. Instead, he left the room, leaving me alone with my thoughts. The next few weeks were tough. My pregnancy symptoms started to kick in, and Robert's cold behavior didn't help. I found solace in the fact that this child was a symbol of our love, even if Robert didn't see it that way. One day, Mrs. Lawson came over unannounced. "I heard the news," she said without preamble. "Is it even true?" "Yes, it's true," I replied, trying to maintain my composure. She smirked. "You think having this child will solidify your place in this family? You're wrong." I felt a surge of anger. This is my family too now, and this child will be a part of it whether you like it or not. She scoffed. "We'll see about that." And with that, she left. The next few months were a blur. I tried to focus on my health and the baby, but the constant tension at home and Robert's doubt wore me down. My only comfort was the small kicks and movements I felt inside me, reminding me that there was a life growing within, waiting to meet the world. But little did I know that the challenges ahead were far greater than what I had already faced. As my pregnancy progressed, it became harder to manage everything on my own. I was constantly nauseous, and even the simplest chores seemed daunting. Robert was indifferent, often coming home late, leaving me to fend for myself. That's when he made the proposal I'd come to regret. "Clara," he began one evening, "I've been thinking. Since you're finding it hard to manage things here, and my parents' house is much bigger with help available, maybe we should move there for a while, until the baby arrives." I was hesitant. Mrs. Lawson's attitude towards me was clear, but at the same time, I felt weak and overwhelmed. "I don't know, Robert. Your mom hasn't exactly been welcoming." He looked at me, trying to reassure. "It's a big house, Clara. We won't even cross paths much, and Dad will be there. You know he likes you." In my vulnerable state, I agreed, thinking it might be for the best. Moving into the Lawsons' residence was an eye-opener. It was a grand house, reflecting the years of prosperity the family enjoyed, but with its grandeur came coldness. The vast hallways echoed with silence, the huge rooms felt devoid of warmth. The only solace came from Mr. Lawson. "Welcome, Clara," he said with a kind smile, giving me a comforting pat on the back. "Don't worry about anything here. Consider this place your home." But the peace was short-lived. Mrs. Lawson's digs and snide remarks were a daily ordeal. She would comment on everything, from the food I ate to the clothes I wore. One day, when I was in the kitchen trying to make myself a sandwich, she walked in, her eyes scanning me up and down. "You sure you should be eating that?" she commented, looking at the sandwich. I took a deep breath. "I think I know what's best for me and my baby," she smirked. "Well, if it is even your baby." I felt my anger rise but held it in check. "It's Robert's baby, and I wish you'd stop implying otherwise." She just laughed, a cold sound that echoed in the large kitchen. "Time will tell, dear. Time will tell." Days turned into weeks. Each day was harder than the last. The house felt like a prison. Robert was always out, and when he was home, he was distant. The baby inside me was my only comfort, reminding me that there was a reason for enduring all this. One evening, as I was sitting in the living room trying to read, Robert stormed in, a frown on his face. "Clara, I heard you've been talking back to my mom." I looked up, surprised. "She has been nothing but rude to me, Robert. What do you expect?" He shook his head. "This is her house. You need to respect that." I felt tears forming. "I thought it was our house too, but every day it feels like I'm walking on eggshells." He didn't say anything, just turned and left the room. I sat there, feeling more alone than ever. As the days passed, the cold shadows of the house seemed to close in on me. But I held on, hoping for better days, not realizing that the worst was yet to come. Fall had settled in, and the leaves outside had started their gradual transformation to a vibrant mix of red and gold. The wind carried with it a sharp chill, heralding the coming winter. But inside the house, the atmosphere was even colder. One evening, after a particularly tiring day, the baby wouldn't stop crying. He was restless, and I tried every trick in the book to calm him down. Mrs. Lawson, evidently irritated by the cries, barged into the room. "Why can't you keep that child quiet? It's unbearable." Holding my crying son, I replied tiredly, "He's just a baby, Mrs. Lawson. They cry sometimes." She scoffed. "Well, maybe if you were a better mother." "Enough of this," I retorted, fed up. "I'm trying my best here. I don't need your constant criticisms." Her face went scarlet with anger. "You have some nerve talking back to me in my own house." The commotion drew Robert in. "What's going on?" "Your wife seems to think she can disrespect me under my own roof," Mrs. Lawson spat. Robert glanced at me, annoyance evident in his eyes. "Clara, just take the baby to our room." Standing my ground, I replied, "Robert, this is our home too. I won't be bullied into hiding." He took a deep breath, his patience clearly running thin. "Clara, just do as I say." When I didn't move, Mrs. Lawson sneered, "If you can't follow the rules, maybe you should leave." Robert, to my shock, nodded in agreement. "Maybe you should." Stunned, I replied, "You can't be serious." His face hardening, Robert stepped forward. "If you won't go to our room, then maybe you should leave the house." "You're throwing me out?" I asked, voice shaky with disbelief. Robert didn't answer. Instead, he moved closer, took hold of my arm, and began pulling me towards the door. I tried to resist, but he was too strong. Holding our crying baby close, I was dragged out of the house. The door slammed behind me, leaving me and my child in the biting cold of the fall evening. Tears streamed down my face, not just from the cold wind, but from the sharp sting of betrayal. My own husband, the man I loved, had just thrown me out of our home. The magnitude of what had just happened weighed heavily on my shoulders as I walked away, holding my child close, trying to shield him from the cold wind. The weight of the night's events pressed heavily on my chest, making each step seem like a monumental effort. My son, sensing my distress, had stopped crying but was whimpering softly. I was at a loss as to where to go. It felt like the world had turned its back on me. Then, a thought struck me. Rachel, my oldest friend, someone who had stood by me during the happiest and saddest times of my life. We'd lost touch recently, primarily because of the tension in my home, but I was sure she'd help. She lived nearby, just a few blocks away. I headed towards her apartment, praying she was home. As I approached the familiar building, memories of our times together flooded my mind. Our college days, the late-night chats, and the countless cups of coffee we'd shared. I reached her door and knocked hesitantly. After what felt like an eternity, the door swung open, revealing a surprised Rachel. "Clara? My God, what happened to you? Why are you here in the middle of the night with the baby?" Choking back tears, I managed, "Rachel, I didn't know where else to go." She immediately pulled me into a tight embrace, murmuring words of comfort. "Come in, come in." Once inside, sitting on her warm couch with a hot cup of tea in hand, I recounted everything. From the tensions with Robert and his mother to the ultimate betrayal that left me on the streets. Rachel listened patiently, her face a mixture of anger and concern. I knew that Robert was changing, but this is unthinkable. I nodded, tears streaming down. He chose them over us, Rach, his own son. Rachel shook her head in disbelief. I can't believe Mrs. Lawson would do something like this, but we'll figure something out, okay? I just don't get it. Why the sudden animosity? Why the doubt over our son? Rachel sighed. People change, Clara. Sometimes not for the better. But you've got your son and friends who care about you. We'll get through this together. Feeling a little calmer, I asked, "What do I do now, Rach?" She thought for a moment. "First, let's get you both settled for the night. Tomorrow, we'll think of the next steps. Maybe talk to a lawyer?" Nodding, I replied, "I never thought I'd need one against my own husband." Rachel gave a sad smile. "Life throws curveballs, Clara. But remember, you're strong, and you're not alone." Feeling a weight lift off my shoulders, I hugged Rachel tight. "Thank you." The night was spent in Rachel's guest room. Though I barely got a wink of sleep, having her by my side made me feel a bit safer, a little less lost. The road ahead was uncertain, but with friends like Rachel, I knew I could face whatever lay in store. The morning after the eviction felt surreal. Waking up in Rachel's apartment, the events of the previous night played back in my mind, and a sinking feeling settled in my chest. After a silent breakfast, Rachel, with her unwavering determination, declared, "We're going to get answers today." "You mean about Robert's sudden change and Mrs. Lawson's animosity?" I asked. "Exactly," Rachel responded, pulling out her phone. "I have a contact, Paul, a private investigator. He's helped some friends in the past. Maybe he can help us understand what's really going on." With that, Rachel dialed a number. "Paul? Hey, it's Rachel. I've got a situation here. Yes, I'll text you the details." Turning to me, she added, "He's good, Clara. We'll know what's happening soon." The days that followed were a whirlwind. Paul discreetly began his investigation, tailing Robert and Mrs. Lawson. Each evening, he'd provide Rachel and me with updates. It wasn't long before Paul unearthed shocking revelations. "I've been following Robert, and it appears he's seeing someone else," he said one evening, handing over a few photographs. My heart sank as I looked at the pictures of Robert and an unfamiliar woman, laughing, dining, and even shopping together. Rachel, anger evident in her voice, asked, "Do you have any idea who she is?" Paul nodded. "Her name's Angela, works in a law firm downtown, but that's not all. I've got audio recordings of Mrs. Lawson that you might find interesting." He played back a conversation where Mrs. Lawson discussed her elaborate plan to have me thrown out so that Robert could gain access to my inheritance. Her voice, dripping with greed, sent chills down my spine. "Once Clara's out of the picture, Robert can divorce her. With a good lawyer, he can claim a good portion of her inheritance for emotional distress or some such nonsense. Angela's firm will handle it. Our boy deserves that money more than she does." I sat in stunned silence. It all made a cruel kind of sense now. Robert's doubts about our son's paternity, the constant harassment, it was all part of a twisted scheme. Rachel, seething with anger, declared, "We're taking this to the police, and you're getting a lawyer, Clara. We'll fight them." Paul nodded. "I've got more recordings and photos. It's concrete evidence." While the truth was a bitter pill to swallow, knowing it gave me a renewed sense of purpose. No longer would I be the victim. With evidence in hand and Rachel by my side, I was ready to confront Robert and Mrs. Lawson and reclaim not just my inheritance, but my dignity and peace of mind. The chapter of betrayal in my life was about to be closed, and I was determined to ensure justice was served. With the evidence in hand and my resolve firm, it was time to confront my soon-to-be ex-husband and his conniving mother. I decided to go to their house, the house I once called home. Rachel insisted on accompanying me, a pillar of strength and support. As we approached the house, my heart raced, but not from fear. It was anger, determination, and the desire to close this traumatic chapter in my life. We rang the doorbell, and Mrs. Lawson answered, feigning surprise. "Clara, what brings you here?" Without mincing words, I replied, "You know why I'm here." Robert appeared from the living room, looking rather uneasy. "Clara," he began, but I cut him off. "No, Robert, it's my turn to talk. We know everything." I held up the photos and the transcripts of the recordings. Mrs. Lawson's face turned pale while Robert looked like he'd been caught red-handed. "How did you—" "Doesn't matter how," Rachel interrupted. "What matters is that you both have been exposed." I took a deep breath, finding my voice. "You thought you could play with my life? You thought you could get rid of me and take everything I've inherited from my parents?" Robert tried to speak. "Clara, No," I shot back. "I gave you everything. My love, my trust, and all you gave back were lies and betrayal. Your affair with Angela, your scheming with your mother to get your hands on my inheritance, you won't get a single cent." Mrs. Lawson, always the instigator, tried to salvage the situation. "Clara, dear, let's discuss this calmly. Maybe there's been a misunderstanding." I scoffed. "Misunderstanding? I've heard your conversations. You orchestrated this entire sham, making Robert doubt our child, and pushing me out. And for what? Money? How low can you stoop?" Rachel stepped forward. "We've already spoken to the police, Mrs. Lawson, and Clara has a lawyer. You won't escape this." As we walked away, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Confronting them had been cathartic. While the journey ahead would be long and challenging, I was ready to rebuild my life, free from the shackles of deceit and betrayal. The courtroom was filled with tense energy, a battleground of truth against deceit, the place where my long-awaited vindication would finally occur. My attorney presented our first piece of evidence, the results of the paternity test that unequivocally proved Robert was indeed the father of my child. The judge reviewed it, casting a stern look at Robert. "Do you have anything to say?" Robert looked down, unable to meet anyone's gaze. "No, Your Honor." Next, we presented the DNA results that would shatter the very foundation of the Lawson family. "Your Honor," my attorney began, "these results indicate that Mr. Robert Lawson is not biologically related to Mr. Richard Lawson." The courtroom went silent. All eyes turned to Mrs. Lawson, her usual confident demeanor replaced with a deer-in-headlights expression. Richard, who had been sitting with a stoic face, looked at his wife with disbelief. You lied to me all these years?" Richard's voice wavered. Mrs. Lawson, trying to regain some semblance of control, stammered, "Richard, it's not what it looks like." But the evidence was irrefutable. The judge continued with the proceedings, his voice firm. Given all the evidence presented, the court rules in favor of Mrs. Clara. Robert Lawson will receive no part of her inheritance. He is also mandated to pay alimony for their child. Furthermore, considering the emotional trauma inflicted upon Mrs. Clara, the court also mandates Robert to pay damages. Mrs. Lawson, once the formidable matriarch, now looked small and defeated. But the courtroom had one more revelation that would strip her of her last vestiges of power. Richard stood up, facing his soon-to-be ex-wife. "I've filed for divorce, and I've already begun the proceedings to claim our house. You won't see a single penny from our joint assets." She was speechless, her empire and decades of manipulation crumbling around her. Walking out of the courtroom, the sunlight seemed brighter, the world fuller. Rachel hugged me tightly. "You did it, Clara. Justice is served." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight lift off my shoulders. It's over. Finally. And as I moved forward, with my son in my arms, I knew I was walking towards a better, brighter future.
Hello there. I'm Rosie, a 30-year-old who works as a manager at a local company. I live with my husband, Jake, in a house that I own. It's nothing fancy, just a cozy place we call home. I guess you could say I'm a pretty modest person, not one to make a fuss. I have a lot of patience, which has always been a strength of mine, or so I thought. Jake and I get along really well. He's a great guy, supportive and kind. We've been married for a few years now, and it's been mostly smooth sailing. Well, except for one little, actually, not so little issue. His parents, Robert and Susan. Now don't get me wrong. I understand the importance of family. But Jake's parents, they're a whole different story. They're very direct people, the type who say whatever is on their mind without thinking about how it might affect others. They don't really understand or respect personal space. It all started pretty harmlessly. Robert and Susan would drop by unannounced for breakfast or dinner. I didn't mind initially. After all, they were family. But it quickly turned into a regular thing. They'd come over whenever they felt like it. And because they had a key to our house, they would just walk in, even when we were not expecting them. One day, I was in the bathroom getting ready for work, and suddenly, I heard someone in the house. I peeked out and saw Susan in the kitchen. "Morning, Rosie. Thought I'd surprise you with breakfast," she said cheerfully. I remember forcing a smile and thinking, this is getting a bit much. Jake, bless his heart, tried to talk to them about it. "Mom, Dad, Rosie and I love having you over, but we also need our own space," he said one evening. But it didn't go well. Susan's eyes welled up with tears, and Robert's face turned red. "Are you saying you don't want us in your life?" Susan cried. "After all we've done for you!" Jake was caught off guard. "No, that's not what I meant." And just like that, the conversation ended. They played the victim card so well, Jake didn't stand a chance. I felt for him. He was torn between his parents and our life together. Things escalated from there. It wasn't just meals anymore. They started staying overnight in our guest room, and before we knew it, they were spending days at our place. It felt like we had permanent house guests. I tried talking to Jake again. "Honey, I love your parents, but this is getting out of hand. They're here all the time," I said, hoping he'd understand. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I know, Rosie. I'll try talking to them again." But deep down, I knew it was a lost cause. They had this way of making him feel guilty, and he just couldn't stand up to them. It was a tough spot, and I felt stuck. I loved Jake, but his parents were just too much. Life with Jake's parents dropping in whenever they pleased started to feel like a TV show where the same episode kept replaying. Breakfast turned into lunches, which turned into dinners, and before I knew it, our guest room seemed more theirs than ours. I tried to be understanding, but it was getting harder each day. One Saturday morning, I woke up to the sound of pots and pans clanging in the kitchen. I rubbed my eyes and looked at the clock. It was barely 6:30 a.m. I wandered into the kitchen, still half asleep, and there was Susan, cheerfully making pancakes. "Good morning, Rosie. I thought we'd have a big family breakfast today," she said, not noticing the surprise on my face. I managed a polite smile. "Good morning, Susan. That's nice of you." I sat at the table, sipping my coffee, watching her move around our kitchen like she owned the place. Robert soon joined us, a newspaper under his arm. "Morning, Rosie. Sleep well?" he asked, not waiting for an answer as he got busy with the sports section. I nodded, still trying to wake up. Jake stumbled in a few minutes later, looking as surprised as I felt. "Mom? Dad, what are you doing here so early?" he asked, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. "We wanted to surprise you with breakfast," Susan said, flipping a pancake with a flourish. Jake gave me an apologetic look, which I returned with a resigned shrug. After that day, their visits became more frequent. They started leaving personal items in the guest room, which soon looked like their second bedroom. I tried to talk to Jake about it, but he was in a tough spot. "I know it's a lot, Rosie, but they're my parents. "What can I do?" he'd say, looking genuinely torn. I nodded, trying to be understanding. "I get it, Jake, but we need our own space too." One evening, I found Susan rearranging our living room. "I thought this would look better over here," she said, pushing the couch to the other side of the room. I couldn't help but feel a little annoyed. "Susan, I appreciate your help, but I liked it the way it was." She looked at me, surprised. "Oh, I just thought it needed a change. But okay, I'll put it back." I watched as she reluctantly moved the couch back, feeling a bit guilty for snapping at her. Things came to a head one night when I came home from work, exhausted, only to find a small gathering in our living room. Robert and Susan had invited some friends over without telling us. "Rosie, dear, we thought we'd have a little get-together. Hope you don't mind," Susan said, handing me a glass of wine. I looked around at the unfamiliar faces in my living room and felt my patience wearing thin. "Actually, Susan, I do mind. Jake and I had plans tonight." The room went silent, and Susan's face fell. "Oh, I didn't realize. We'll wrap this up then." Jake came to my rescue. "Yeah, Mom, we had a quiet evening planned. Maybe check with us next time?" They ended the gathering shortly after, but the damage was done. I felt like a stranger in my own home, and it was clear something had to change. I tried talking to Jake again. "This can't go on, Jake. We need to set some boundaries with your parents." He nodded, looking more determined this time. "You're right, Rosie. I'll talk to them. This is our home, and we should feel comfortable in it." The breaking point came when Jake and I planned a short holiday. We needed a break, a chance to recharge and get away from everything, including the constant presence of his parents in our house. I was really looking forward to it. "We'll be gone for a week, just the two of us. It'll be nice," I said to Jake as we packed our bags. He smiled, wrapping his arm around me. "I can't wait. We need this, Rosie." We informed Robert and Susan about our trip, expecting them to understand. "We're going away for a week. Just wanted to let you guys know," Jake told them over dinner. Susan looked surprised. "A whole week? What about the house? Who will look after it?" I exchanged a glance with Jake. "The house will be fine, Susan. It's just a week." We left for our holiday, and for the first few days, it was bliss. No unexpected visitors, no rearranged furniture, just peace. But our peace was short-lived. On the third day, we received a call from Jake's work. There was an emergency, and they needed him back. Our relaxing getaway was cut short. We were both disappointed, but understood that these things happen. We arrived home 2 days earlier than planned, expecting to walk into an empty house. But what we found was far from it. The moment we opened the door, we were greeted by the sound of laughter and music. There were people in our living room, people we didn't know. "What the?" Jake muttered, looking as confused as I felt. We walked in further, and that's when we saw them. Robert and Susan, in the midst of a group of strangers, having what looked like a party. "Mom? Dad? What's going on?" Jake asked, his voice a mix of surprise and anger. Susan looked up, her smile fading when she saw us. "Jake, Rosie, you're back early." "Who are these people?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Robert cleared his throat. "Well, we thought since you were away, we'd rent the place out to some friends, just for a few days." I felt my jaw drop. "You did what?" Jake looked like he was about to explode. "You rented out our house? Without even asking us?" Susan wrung her hands. "We thought it would be fine. You were away, and these friends needed a place to stay." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They had turned our home into a rental property without our permission. The nerve of it all left me speechless. Jake was fuming. "Everyone out. Now," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. The strangers gathered their things, murmuring apologies as they left. Robert and Susan stood there, looking guilty but also defiant. "We didn't think it would be a problem," Robert said, trying to justify their actions. "A problem? You crossed a line. This is our home, not a hotel," Jake said, his voice shaking with anger. I stood there, watching the scene unfold, feeling a mix of anger, disbelief, and disappointment. This was it. This was the moment when I realized things couldn't go on like this. Something had to change, and it had to change now. After the house was cleared, Jake and I sat down with his parents. "This can't happen again. You can't just use our house like this," Jake said, trying to remain calm. Susan started crying. "We didn't mean any harm. We just thought—" "No, Mom. There's no excuse for this," Jake interrupted. "We need our privacy. We need you to respect our home." They apologized, promising it would never happen again. But their apologies felt empty, and their promises even more so. I looked at Jake, and I could tell he felt the same way. Exhausted and at my wits' end, I knew we had to do something. The love I felt for Jake propelled me to find a middle ground, a solution that wouldn't tear our family apart. The constant invasions by his parents were suffocating, and it was time to reclaim our space. "We need a break, Jake, and we need to do something about your parents," I said, the determination clear in my voice. Understanding the gravity of the situation, Jake nodded. "You're right. Let's plan a weekend getaway. But first, let's change the locks. They can't keep walking in like they own the place." So, before our much-needed escape, we executed our secret mission. Replacing the locks felt liberating, like we were finally setting boundaries that should have been there all along. With the new locks in place, we packed our bags. Before leaving, I suggested, "Let's turn off our phones. No distractions, no calls, just us." Jake agreed without a second thought, and we left for our weekend retreat, phones off, hoping for a few days of peace. Our weekend was a slice of heaven. We laughed, shared stories, and for a while, the chaos of our life seemed a distant memory. But as we prepared to head back, a nagging sense of uncertainty crept in. On our drive home, we finally turned our phones back on. Almost immediately, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. "Hello?" I answered hesitantly. "This is Officer Daniels. Am I speaking with Mrs. Rosie Thompson?" A stern voice inquired. "Yes, this is she," I replied, my heart starting to race. "I'm calling about an incident at your residence. We have detained several individuals who broke the locks and entered your home." My mouth went dry. "Broke the locks? Entered our home?" "Yes, ma'am. It appears they were trying to gain unauthorized access. We have them at the station." I glanced at Jake, who was listening intently, his expression a mix of shock and confusion. "We'll be home soon, officer. Thank you for letting us know," I managed to say, trying to keep my voice steady. Hanging up, I relayed the information to Jake. His grip on the steering wheel tightened, and he let out a long, deep breath. "Who would do that? And why?" I whispered, a sense of dread washing over me. "We'll find out soon enough," Jake replied, his jaw set firmly. As Jake and I drove home, the weight of uncertainty was heavy in the car. We both knew that whatever awaited us at home was bound to be unpleasant. The thought of strangers breaking into our home was unsettling, but deep down, I had a nagging suspicion about who might be involved. "We should have seen this coming," Jake said, breaking the silence. "Changing the locks was bound to set them off." I nodded, knowing he was referring to his parents. "Let's just deal with it and move forward. We can't let this ruin what we've built." Arriving home, we found a police car parked outside. My heart sank. This was real. Officer Daniels, a tall man with a stern face, greeted us. "We caught them trying to break in. They were quite adamant about getting inside," he explained. "Who were they?" Jake asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "It was your parents, Mr. Thompson, and some of their friends," Officer Daniels replied. Jake's face turned pale. "My parents? But why would they—" "It seems they were unaware of the lock change. When they couldn't get in, they tried to force their way," the officer continued. I could see Jake struggling to process the information. His parents had crossed a line, and there was no turning back. "Can we see them?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "They're still at the station. You can talk to them there if you wish." Jake and I exchanged a look, a silent agreement passing between us. We needed to face this head-on. At the station, we found Robert and Susan sitting in a small room, looking both angry and embarrassed. Their friends were there too, looking equally uncomfortable. "Mom, Dad, what were you thinking?" Jake asked, his disappointment evident. Robert stood up, his expression defiant. "We came to check on the house. We always have a key. Why did you change the locks without telling us?" "It's our house, Dad. You can't just come and go as you please. We've talked about this," Jake replied, trying to keep his calm. Susan started to cry. "We just wanted to be close to you. We never thought you'd lock us out." "It's not about locking you out. It's about respect and privacy. You can't break into our house because you feel entitled to it," I said, finding my voice. Their friends looked on, awkward and silent, clearly regretting being part of this mess. "We're sorry, but we didn't know what else to do," one of them mumbled. Officer Daniels stepped in. "We understand it's a family matter, but breaking and entering is a serious offense. We need assurances this won't happen again." Jake looked at his parents, a mix of sadness and resolve in his eyes. "This can't happen again, Mom and Dad. You need to understand boundaries." Robert and Susan nodded, the reality of the situation finally sinking in. We left the station with heavy hearts. The drive back home was quiet, each of us lost in our thoughts. The events of the day had taken a toll, and as we walked back into our home, we knew things would never be the same again. The days following the incident were like walking through a thick fog. Jake and I were trying to make sense of everything while dealing with the aftermath. We had to have several uncomfortable conversations with neighbors, explaining what had happened. It was embarrassing and draining. One evening, as we were sitting in the living room, Jake let out a long sigh. "I never thought my parents would go this far," he said, shaking his head. I reached out and held his hand. "It's hard, I know, but we'll get through this together." He squeezed my hand in response, and we sat there in silence, each lost in our thoughts. The doorbell rang, breaking the silence. I got up to answer it, finding our neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, standing there with a concerned look. "Rosie, dear, is everything all right? We saw the police the other day," she said, her voice full of worry. "Yes, Mrs. Henderson. It was a family issue, but it's under control now. Thank you for checking in," I replied, offering her a small smile. She nodded, still looking uncertain. "Well, if you need anything, you know where to find me." After she left, Jake looked at me. "Maybe we should have a small get-together. Invite the neighbors, clear the air. What do you think?" I thought about it for a moment. "That's a good idea. Let's do it this weekend." The preparations kept us busy, and for a brief time, it felt good to focus on something positive. We invited a few neighbors, keeping it small and casual. The day of the get-together arrived, and our guests slowly trickled in. The atmosphere was light, and the conversation flowed. It was a much-needed distraction. During the evening, Mrs. Henderson approached me. "You two are such a lovely couple. It's a shame about the trouble with your in-laws." I gave her a reassuring smile. "Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. We're handling it the best we can." As the evening wound down, Jake and I felt a sense of relief. The event had served its purpose, easing the tension in the neighborhood. The past few weeks had been a roller coaster, but Jake and I knew what needed to be done. Setting boundaries was the only way forward. We sat at the kitchen table, carefully drafting the rules we felt were necessary for our sanity and the health of our relationship. "We can't just go on like this, Jake. It's time for a change," I said firmly, pen in hand. He nodded, looking somber. "I know. It's just going to be tough." Once we were ready, we invited Jake's parents over to discuss the new rules. The atmosphere was tense as they sat down in our living room. Jake cleared his throat, and I could see his hands were trembling slightly. "Mom, Dad, we need to talk about some changes we're making," he began, his voice steady despite his nerves. His parents looked at us, their expressions a mix of confusion and concern. "We've decided to set some boundaries regarding your visits to our house," I continued, trying to sound as calm and composed as possible. Robert, Jake's father, raised an eyebrow. "What kind of boundaries?" Jake took a deep breath. "First, we need you to call and ask before coming over. No more unexpected visits. And we can't give you the keys back. It's important for us to have our own space," I added, trying to sound as gentle as possible. Susan, Jake's mother, immediately looked upset. "But we're family! Why are you doing this to us?" "It's about respect and privacy, Susan," I replied. "We love you, but we need these boundaries for the sake of our relationship." Their reaction was immediate and emotional. Susan started crying, and John's face turned red with anger. "This is outrageous! We're your parents! How could you treat us like strangers?" Robert exclaimed, his voice raising. "We're not trying to hurt you," Jake said, his voice strained. "We just need some rules." Susan sobbed. "We refuse to accept these rules. It's like you don't want us in your lives anymore." The conversation spiraled from there. No matter how much we tried to explain, they wouldn't listen. They categorically refused to comply with the rules and kept crying, playing the victims. Seeing no way to reach an understanding, Jake and I exchanged a resigned look. "Maybe it's best if we take a break from each other for a while," Jake finally said, his voice heavy with sadness. I nodded in agreement, though my heart ached at the thought. Jake's parents left our house in tears, and we were left in a deafening silence. It was one of the hardest decisions we had ever made, but we knew it was necessary. We needed space, and they needed time to understand and respect our boundaries. In the quiet of our home, Jake wrapped his arm around me. "I'm sorry it had to come to this." I leaned into his embrace. "It's okay. We had to stand up for ourselves. Maybe with time, they'll understand." As we sat there, I couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt and sadness. But deep down, I knew we had made the right choice. Setting boundaries was essential, even if it meant stepping back from family for a while. We are not in contact with Robert and Susan at the moment. Perhaps you will condemn us for this, but we decided to wait until they themselves understand the wrongness of their actions.
I grew up knowing Lucas, mostly from a distance. We were from the same neighborhood, and our paths often crossed on the street, but our worlds were vastly different. I came from a simple family. We didn't have much, but we had each other. Lucas, on the other hand, was part of the well-known Grayson family, who owned the largest company in town. Everyone knew them, and almost everyone envied them. One day, as I was walking home from my job at the local grocery store, Lucas approached me. It was unexpected. We barely spoke before this. "Hey, Tiffany," he greeted, flashing a smile that made many girls in our town go weak in the knees. "Hi, Lucas," I replied, a bit surprised. "How are you?" "Good, thanks. Look, I was wondering if you'd like to grab a coffee tomorrow." The invite took me off guard. "Coffee? With you?" "Yeah, I mean, we've known each other for years, but never really talked. I'd like to change that. What do you say?" I hesitated, then said, "All right, why not?" From that day, things moved quickly. Our coffee date turned into dinners, movie nights, and long walks. We spent days getting to know each other. The more time I spent with him, the more I realized we had a lot in common. One evening, as we were walking by the river, Lucas turned to me and said, "Tiffany, these past few weeks with you have been amazing. I've never felt this way about anyone before." I looked up at him. "Lucas, this is all so new to me. I never expected any of this." He took my hands in his. "Neither did I, but now that we're here, I don't want to let you go." Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Before I knew it, Lucas was on one knee holding out a simple ring. "Tiffany, will you marry me?" Tears filled my eyes. "Yes, Lucas. Yes, I will." The news of our engagement spread quickly. Everyone was surprised. No one saw it coming. But here we were, two people from different worlds, finding love in the most unexpected place. As the wedding preparations began, I couldn't help but feel like I was living in a dream. The Grayson family was beyond supportive. They welcomed me with open arms, especially Lucas's mother, Mrs. Harriet Grayson. She was thrilled about our union and took charge of most of the wedding arrangements. "Tiffany," she said to me one day, "I want you to have the best wedding. You're going to be a Grayson now." "Thank you, Mrs. Grayson. I never imagined any of this," I replied, overwhelmed. "You deserve it, dear. Lucas is lucky to have you." The big day arrived sooner than we expected. As I stood at the altar, looking at Lucas, I felt grateful for this unexpected turn my life had taken. Little did I know, things were about to change in ways I could never have anticipated. The move to our new home was swift, just days after our wedding. It was a quaint, charming place, not too large, with a hint of vintage charm. Lucas had picked it out, saying it was perfect for us to start our life together. From the moment we stepped in, I felt an unexpected chill, not from the house itself, but from Lucas. The warmth he had exuded throughout our courtship seemed to evaporate. Our rooms echoed with silence, broken only by the mundane conversations about household chores or grocery lists. One evening, after setting up the dinner table, I tried initiating a light conversation. "The house feels cozy, doesn't it? We can maybe get some plants for the balcony?" Lucas, who was absorbed in some paperwork, merely grunted in reply. Sensing his detachment, I attempted to bridge the distance. "Lucas, is everything okay?" He looked up, seemingly irritated. "Yes, why wouldn't it be?" "I just feel you've been distant since we moved in." I hesitated. "Did I do something wrong?" He sighed heavily, avoiding eye contact. "It's nothing. I'm just busy with work." "But you're always here, at home, with me," I pointed out, trying to understand his sudden change. Lucas's voice hardened. "Look, Tiffany, I have a lot on my mind. The marriage, the house, my work responsibilities. It's all a bit overwhelming." I felt a pang in my heart. "I thought we were in this together," I murmured. He didn't respond, just got up and headed to our bedroom, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the now cold dinner. The days that followed were no different. Mornings were a hurried affair, with Lucas often leaving before I was even fully awake. Evenings were cold and silent. I tried engaging him, suggesting we go out or inviting friends over, but he always had an excuse. Mrs. Harriet Grayson, during one of her visits, sensed the tension. "Tiffany," she whispered, pulling me aside. "Is everything okay between you two?" I bit my lip, trying to hold back tears. "I don't know, Mrs. Grayson. He's changed." She gave my hand a comforting squeeze. "Give it time, dear. Marriage is a big step. Perhaps he's just adjusting." I nodded, but deep down, doubts were setting in. Was this how my married life was going to be? In the shadow of Lucas's coldness? Determined to find answers, I decided to take matters into my own hands. Days turned into weeks, and the cold atmosphere in our home continued. The initial days of trying to break the ice with Lucas had led to a routine of silence. I'd find myself often staring at the wall, counting the minutes until he'd return home. But when he did, it was as if I was living with a stranger. One evening, I decided to cook his favorite meal, hoping it might cheer him up or at least get him to talk. As I set the table, I thought of our earlier days and how he'd compliment my cooking. Now, the very idea of him sitting to eat with me seemed like a distant dream. Lucas walked in later than usual. I greeted him with a hesitant smile. "Hey, I made your favorite tonight." He glanced at the table and then at me. "I ate out." "Oh," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Okay." There was a moment of silence. "Lucas," I started, my voice firm, "we need to talk." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Not now, Tiffany." "When then? You've been distant for weeks. I don't even know what's going on in your life anymore." Lucas looked at me, his face expressionless. "It's just work. There's a lot of pressure." I nodded slowly. "But we used to talk, Lucas. We used to share. Now I feel like I'm living with a ghost." Lucas looked away, not meeting my eyes. "I need some space, Tiffany." The words felt like a blow. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my emotions in check. "Space? We live together, Lucas. We're married. If there's a problem, we should be facing it together." He didn't reply, just turned and headed towards our bedroom, leaving me standing there, lost and confused. The next morning, I woke up to find him already gone. The bed was neatly made, and a note lay on the pillow next to mine. "Had to leave early. Don't wait up. Days passed, and the pattern continued. Lucas would leave early and return late, often after I'd gone to bed. We became like two ships passing in the night, with barely any interaction. One afternoon, as I sat in the living room flipping through an old photo album, tears streamed down my face. Pictures of our early days, our smiles, our closeness seemed like memories from another lifetime. Mrs. Grayson dropped by unannounced. Noticing my tears, she sat next to me, concern evident on her face. "Tiffany, what's going on?" Wiping my tears, I replied, "It's Lucas, Mrs. Grayson. He's changed. I feel so alone." She looked at the pictures and then at me. "Marriage has its ups and downs, dear, but communication is key." I nodded. "I've tried talking to him, but he shuts me out." Mrs. Grayson patted my hand gently. "Then maybe it's time to take a different approach. Find out what's really bothering him." Taking a deep breath, I nodded. "You're right. I need to get to the bottom of this." Determined to uncover the mystery behind Lucas's behavior, I decided it was time to take matters into my own hands. The nights were the hardest. Alone in the vast mansion, I'd often find myself waiting for Lucas to walk through the door. But more often than not, the ticking of the clock was the only sound that kept me company. One evening, after yet another night alone, desperation took over. I decided to call Mrs. Grayson. Perhaps she knew something I didn't. Maybe she could talk some sense into Lucas. "Mrs. Grayson?" I started hesitantly when she picked up the phone. "It's Tiffany. I was hoping to speak with you about Lucas." There was a brief pause, then in a softer tone, she replied, "Oh, Tiffany, what's the matter?" Taking a deep breath, I confessed, "Lucas hasn't been coming home. He's hardly ever here, and I don't know what to do." To my surprise, her tone shifted instantly. "Tiffany, my son has responsibilities, bigger than you might understand. He's managing a massive company, trying to maintain our family's legacy." Stammering, I tried to explain. "I understand, but he doesn't come home. At all. Nights are so lonely." Mrs. Grayson's voice hardened. "You knew what you were getting into when you married him. You need to adjust and be grateful for the life he's providing you." Tears filled my eyes. "I just want our marriage to be how I imagined." There was a cold silence. Then she said, "Lucas mentioned you might be difficult, always wanting more. You should be thankful for what you have, Tiffany." The conversation ended shortly after, leaving me even more bewildered and alone. Whatever Lucas had told his mother had painted me in a terrible light. What was he hiding? Why was he driving this wedge between his family and me? It was clear that I needed answers, and I was determined to find them. I enlisted the help of an old classmate, David, now a private detective. Within days, he presented me with photos that made my heart sink. Days turned into nights, and my sense of isolation grew. Each evening felt like an echo of the previous one. I'd walk through the grand halls, touching the expensive decor, but feeling more disconnected than ever. One gloomy afternoon, while I sat in the drawing room staring blankly at the pouring rain outside, my phone vibrated. It was an unfamiliar number. "Hello?" I said hesitantly. "Tiffany, dear, it's Aunt Margaret, Lucas's aunt." Surprised, I replied, "Oh, hello, Aunt Margaret. It's nice to hear from you." Her voice was warm, but there was a hint of concern. "I just wanted to check in and see how you were feeling, dear. It's been so long since our last chat." I was puzzled. "I'm fine, thank you. Why do you ask?" She hesitated, then said, "Well, Lucas mentioned you'd been struggling lately. He said you'd been having a tough time adjusting and dealing with some personal health issues." I blinked in confusion. "Health issues?" Aunt Margaret continued. "Yes, he mentioned you were battling severe depression and that he's been so worried about you." The weight of realization hit me. This was the story Lucas was spinning to his family. I felt a mix of anger and disbelief. I don't know where he got that from, Aunt Margaret. I've been lonely, yes, but I'm not suffering from depression. Aunt Margaret sounded genuinely surprised. Oh, well, he seemed so concerned. He even said he was getting you the best treatment and medications. My mind raced. Not only had Lucas been lying about his whereabouts, but he'd also been crafting an elaborate tale about my supposed condition to his family. Trying to keep my composure, I said, "Thank you for your concern, Aunt Margaret. I'll have to talk to Lucas about this." Before we ended the call, she added, "Well, since you're feeling better, I'd love for you to come to my birthday celebration next week. I'm inviting close family, and it would be lovely to see you." "Of course," I replied, trying to mask the turmoil inside me. "I'd love to." Once the call ended, my emotions were a whirlwind. Lucas's deceit ran deeper than I'd imagined. But Aunt Margaret's invitation gave me an idea. It would be the perfect place to confront him, surrounded by the very family he'd lied to. As I pondered my next moves, I felt a newfound determination. Lucas had woven a web of lies, but I was ready to expose the truth. The festive atmosphere of Aunt Margaret's birthday celebration was in full swing when I decided it was time. As guests laughed and chatted, I took a deep breath, preparing myself for the confrontation. Lucas stood amidst a group, laughing at some joke, appearing to be the perfect son and husband. I approached him, my hands clutching the jars of medication, each one empty. The murmurs of the gathering dimmed as all eyes turned to us. With every step, my resolve hardened. "Lucas," I said, my voice loud enough to command the attention of the room. I placed the medicine jars in front of him, their labels glaringly evident. He glanced at them, his laughter fading, confusion clouding his eyes. "What's this?" he asked, his tone flippant. "These are the medications I'm supposedly on," I responded. "The ones you've been telling everyone you've been buying for me." He stared at them, genuinely puzzled. "Why are you showing me these?" He picked up one jar, examining it before carelessly tossing it onto the floor. "This," I said, pointing at the shattered jar, "is how much you know about my so-called illness. You can't even recognize the medication you claim to buy for me." Whispers swept through the room as realization dawned on the guests. The air grew thick with tension. Lucas's face drained of color. I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered, but his eyes betrayed his panic. Aunt Margaret stepped forward, her face a mask of shock and anger. "Lucas, is this true? Have you been lying to us about Tiffany's health?" He couldn't respond, cornered by the weight of his deceit. The room was a sea of accusing eyes, each one demanding answers. "I trusted you, Lucas," I said, my voice trembling with emotion. "Not only did you betray me, but you also lied to your family, to everyone who cared about us." He looked down, unable to meet anyone's gaze. The room remained silent, the weight of the revelation sinking in. All the pretense, the stories, the lies, they had finally caught up with him. With the shattered medicine jar as the only sound, the room was thick with tension. Lucas had gone pale, his confident facade crumbled. I wasn't done, though. With one last ace up my sleeve, I took out the pictures David had given me. Pictures that showed Lucas with a woman who wasn't me. "Recognize her?" I asked, handing the pictures to Aunt Margaret, who was closest to me. She looked at them, her eyes widening with recognition and dismay. "Oh no, Lucas, not her," she murmured, more to herself than to anyone else. Lucas shifted uncomfortably, looking like a deer caught in headlights. "What is it, Aunt Maggie?" one of the cousins, Sarah, asked. Aunt Margaret looked up, her expression grave. "This is Isabella Travers. She's well known in our community, for all the wrong reasons." I felt a chill. The way Aunt Margaret said it, it seemed this Isabella had a history with the family. Lucas's mother, Mrs. Grayson, approached and took a look at the photos. The color drained from her face. "I thought you were done with her after—" She stopped, shaking her head. "I can't believe you'd do this to Tiffany, to all of us." Lucas was cornered, looking between the two women with panic evident in his eyes. "Mom, it's not what you think," he started, but Aunt Margaret interrupted him. "We all warned you about her years ago, Lucas. We thought marrying Tiffany would have set you on the right path. Isabella is nothing but trouble." Lucas seemed to shrink, his posture slouched and defeated. "It's not like that. I mean, it started out, but it's complicated." "Complicated?" I echoed, my voice sharp. "You marry me, lie about my health, and all the while you're with her? Explain that complication to me." Lucas opened his mouth, then closed it, no words coming out. He looked broken, defeated, but I felt no sympathy. He had deceived everyone, and it was time for the truth. Aunt Margaret, visibly upset, handed the photos back to me. "Tiffany, I'm so sorry," she said. "You deserve so much better than this." I nodded, looking at the pictures. "Thank you, Aunt Maggie. All I wanted was the truth." The room was filled with murmured conversations as the party guests processed the revelations. Lucas looked around. No friends in sight, no allies to defend him. He had played his games, and now he was facing the consequences. For the first time since this ordeal began, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. The truth was out, and I was ready to move forward, away from the lies and deceit that had become my life. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The beauty outside stood in stark contrast to the turmoil that had just occurred inside the Grayson household. I sat on the porch steps, taking a moment to collect my thoughts. David approached me, his usual confident demeanor replaced with genuine concern.
"Are you okay?"
he asked. I looked up, forcing a smile.
"I will be. Thanks for everything, David. Without you, I'd still be in the dark."
He sat down next to me. "I just wish I could have done more. No one should go through what you did." I sighed. "It's done now. All that's left is to move forward." He looked out towards the horizon. "What will you do now?" "I haven't decided," I replied. "But I know I can't stay here. I need a fresh start somewhere away from all this." David nodded. "You deserve happiness, Tiffany. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." I smiled, feeling a warmth despite the situation. "Thank you, David." Inside, the murmur of voices continued. Some of the family were angry, some confused, but the truth was out, and everyone knew it. I had no intentions of going back inside. Not now, not ever. My phone buzzed. I pulled it out and saw a message from Mrs. Grayson. "I'm so sorry for what happened. We will refuse Lucas financial support. He can forget about inheriting the family company. If you ever need anything, don't hesitate to ask. Take care of yourself." I replied with a simple "thank you" and put the phone back in my pocket. After a while, David stood up. "I should get going. If you ever need anything, Tiffany, just call, okay?" I nodded. "I will. Thanks again, David." He smiled, patting my shoulder reassuringly, and walked away. The house behind me felt cold, unwelcoming. The only thing tying me to it was the memories, and now they were all tainted. The next morning, I packed up my belongings, leaving behind everything that reminded me of Lucas and the life I thought I had. Aunt Margaret offered to help, but I declined. This was something I had to do alone. As I drove away, I didn't look back. The house, Lucas, the lies, they were all behind me. Ahead lay a new journey, new beginnings, and a chance at happiness. The end was also a new beginning. I knew challenges awaited, but I also knew I was strong enough to face them. With each mile I put between myself and the past, the brighter my future looked. The road ahead was open, and I was ready to embark on my next adventure, free from the shadows of deceit. And as I drove into the rising sun, I felt a sense of hope and renewal, knowing that the best was yet to come.